Chapter 5741. Inside a farmhouse's courtyard house. A few poultry kept outside cooed and walked slowly along the fence, occasionally lowering their heads to peck. A sow covered in dust was lying in the pigsty, using its head to nudge the dirty sink. "Mother, I think that pig has grown quite fat. Let's sell it at the restaurant tomorrow at the market. I don't know if it can be sold for a good price." The dusty pig seemed to understand something. Suddenly, it ran over and hit the fence with its head. "What the hell is it? It's going crazy again. Ouch. Mother, I told you this pig has a bad temper. It's sick. We should have sold it to the restaurant for spirit coins." Outside the fence, a few vines whipped in. The young woman said angrily, "Mother, find something to tie it up. We'll sell it in town today. It would throw a tantrum and knock into things." Ever since this pig was brought back, it had quite a temper. The footsteps of the mother and daughter went away. Perhaps they were looking for ropes or something. Suddenly, a figure landed in the courtyard. There was a red burn scar on the woman's face. She looked at the grayish pig that was scurrying around and suddenly, tears flowed down her cheeks. "Miss, I've finally found you. How did you become like this?" Mu Xiaoxue was furious. Previously, Second Qin had used a transformation talisman to turn her into a piglet, but that heartless man actually used his sacred energy to seal her outer appearance. In this world, how many people could break the seal of his saint energy? Even if the effect of the shape-shifting charm had faded with time, the sacred power seal had not been broken. The unlucky Mu Xiaoxue continued to live in the form of an animal. She was careful and cautious enough. Who knew that on the day she came out to look for food, she would be kidnapped by a group of villagers and brought back to this farmhouse's courtyard house. She hit the fence crazily, screaming and screaming. But in the end, she still could not escape from this farmhouse's courtyard house. When she heard that the lowly peasant girl said that she would be sold to the restaurant, Mu Xiaoxue could not help but panic. If she was sold to the restaurant, she would be killed. But she did not want to die, not at all. She was truly afraid of Arbor now. She didn't want to take revenge on her. She only had one humble wish, which was to regain her human form and find a prosperous place to live the rest of her life. She had previously buried some gold, silver, jade, and jewelry in a remote courtyard. If she exchanged them for spirit coins, she would definitely be able to live a comfortable life for the rest of her life. Perhaps with her looks, she could marry into a good family in the future and have many children and grandchildren. She forcefully arched her head and shouted at the red-scarred woman outside the fence. Maid Xiao Ro's eyes revealed a trace of pity. "Miss, don't worry. This family just wants some spirit coins. I'll buy you from you later. I won't let you suffer again." Mu Xiaoxue pushed herself against the fence and roared angrily in her heart, "I'm suffering right now. As long as I don't return to my human form, I will continue to suffer, continue to suffer. You're just a little maid. How can you not let me suffer? What ability do you have to stop me from suffering? If you really have a loyal heart, you should do everything in your power to help me remove the transformation talisman seal on my body." "Hey, who are you?" The farmer woman and her daughter returned. When they saw another person in their courtyard, they couldn't help but be startled. You, how can you trespass on private property? We can report you like this." The young farmer woman held her mother's hand. The mother and daughter were so frightened that they took a few steps back. "Don't be nervous." Xiao Ro quickly said, I want to buy your pig. Can you give me a price?" "What? You want to buy a pig?" The farmer woman rolled her eyes and immediately put on a smiling face. She looked at Mu Xiaoxue in the pigsty. "You see, it wasn't easy for our Xiao Hui to become so fat. No matter what, it should be at least 5,000 spirit coins." The farmer woman was startled and hurriedly pulled her daughter's sleeve. Wasn't this extortion? If they sent it to a big restaurant in town, they would at most earn 500 spirit coins. Her daughter asked for 10 times the price. Mu Xiaoxue was furious in the pigsty. She kept banging her head against the fence. She angrily cursed in her heart, "You idiot, you're a cultivator. In any case, you are now a great spirit master. Crushing these two village girls in front of you is as simple as crushing ants. You could have just killed them. Why did you have to be so long-winded with these greedy village women? Xiao Rou took out the bag of spirit coins from her inner world and gave it to the farmer woman. The farmer woman immediately smiled until her eyebrows cracked. She quickly said enthusiastically, "Daughter, quickly tie up the pig for our guest." "No need, no need. Yes, yes. This pig is very fierce. It runs as soon as it's released. It won't run far once it's tied up." As she spoke, she opened the gate. The mother and daughter worked together to tie Mu Xiaoxue, who was running left and right, around her neck with a rope and around her body. Mu Xiaoxue wanted to squeeze them to death, but the farmer woman suddenly tightened the rope. She couldn't even breathe. The woman and her daughter dragged Mu Xiaoxue out of the fence and closed the gate again. They handed one end of the rope to Xiao Rou. "Guest, I'll leave the pig to you. You have to watch it carefully. It's very fierce. It often bangs its head here and there. It's very strange." Xiao Rou looked at Mu Xiaoxue's bruises and couldn't help but shed tears. She carried her out of the farmer's courtyard. Mu Xiaoxue was so angry that she cursed in her heart. "You're such a good person. Didn't you want to treat me well? Didn't you say you wanted to take care of me? Why didn't you teach them a lesson when they saw me being abused like this?" Mu Xiaoxue didn't know that Xiao Rou wouldn't do anything to ordinary people. The mother and daughter from the village didn't know that their miss was someone who was sealed by a talisman. They were just ordinary village women who were used to farm work. They raised pigs, chickens, and ducks. It was impossible for them to treat poultry as if they were emperors. Whipping and driving livestock was a common thing in the farmer's courtyard. How could Xiao Rou kill people for such a thing? Xiao Rou wasn't Mu Xiaoxue. She had her own bottom line in her heart, even though she was a maid from the beginning to the end. However, she also secretly told herself that she must take good care of her miss in the future. Even if her miss couldn't regain her human form for the rest of her life, it wouldn't be a problem. She would definitely let her miss live a good life without worrying about food and clothing. Many, many years later one day, Mu Xiaoxue ate until she was fat and strong. She lay on the grass in the courtyard and looked up at the sky. She suddenly remembered what her mother had said to her while crying. "Xiao Shui, you can't win against her. Mother doesn't ask you to be rich or have a meteoric rise. Mother just wants you to live well. Xiao Shui, listen to mother's advice." Stop. She couldn't help but shed tears of regret. She probably couldn't turn back in this life. She really regretted not listening to her mother's teachings. She regretted it so much. Chapter 5742. Heikyu. The venerable peach blossom immortal looked up at the clear sky. "Didn't you say we'd reach in a day or two?" GC and the others were rowing the boat with all their might. Hearing his voice, they turned back to look. "Lord, we're going against the wind now, so we're rowing slower. We'll reach the shore tomorrow morning at the earliest." "Hurry up, the conditions are too bad. There's not even a shelter. Luckily, it's not raining. Otherwise, we wouldn't even have a shelter." "Don't, just shut up." Mo Lien glared at him. Whatever he said with his crow's beak came true. "But it's so boring." Hu Shurchen sighed and leaned against the bow of the boat. Glancing at the snake sitting upright, Hu Shurchen narrowed his eyes. "Zualan Mountain, why don't we play Ma Diao?" "Ah, right, I remember now. You're a stinky snake who's been suppressed in the undersea abyss for so many years. You probably don't know how to play." Zualan Mountain exploded. "Who says I don't know how to play? Let's play then. Who's afraid of who?" Mo Lien looked at Hu Shurchen speechlessly. This guy was in the mood for leisure. Hu Shurchen winked at him. When Mo Lien saw this guy's expression, he knew that this guy wanted to scam people again. He invited Hu Shurchen so enthusiastically, so he definitely wasn't trying to trick him. Mo Lien, after asking old Zhou to accompany them, the four of them sat down, took out a Ma Diao from their inner worlds, and started playing. Hu Shurchen waved his hand at Hu Shurchen and winked at Mo Lien, who was sitting on his hand. "Lanshan, you've been in the undersea abyss for so many years. Do you have any entertainment activities?" "No, I just sleep." "Then you've been living too poorly." As Hu Shurchen spoke, he gave Mo Lien a look. Mo Lien's mouth twitched. She ran her fingers over the cards, opened the 10,000, and played a card that Hu Shurchen wanted. "Wait, Touch again. Old Zhou, he didn't see anything. I won. Hu Shurchen pushed the cards and smiled. Lanshan, do you know how to play? It's okay if you don't know how to do it. Tell us and we'll teach you. Zhuo Lanshan wanted to save face no matter what. Who said I don't know how to play? Continue. After a few rounds, all of them were firecrackers at Zhuolan Mountain. Old Zhou was speechless. Young Master Mo and young Master Swan must have worked together to trick others, and they had developed a tacit understanding of killing gazes. Lanshan, why don't we play big? If you win, we'll give you half of the things in our inner worlds. If we win, you'll give us 10 drops of human snake blood and 1 human snake tooth. How about that? Old Zhou thought to himself that it was really nothing much. You are most likely waiting for Zhuolan Mountain to fall into the pit. Mo Lian looked at Zhuo Lanshan expressionlessly. If you're afraid, you can tell us. We won't force you. After all, you're a coward. Who's a coward? Let's bet then. Do you think I'm afraid of you? Many years later, Mo Baobao was dressed in a small robe with blue flowers on the bottom. He held a shiny dagger in his hand and gestured around in the garden energetically. Godfather, is this the right move? Yes, but you have to be faster when you attack. Duan Yu turned around and saw Zhuo Lanshan pass by behind them with a constipated expression while covering his face. What's wrong? My toothache. Zhuo Lanshan covered his face and tearfully glanced at the dagger in Mo Baobao's hand before leaving in tears. Duan Yu, what was wrong with this guy? He looked like he had a toothache every morning when he passed by the royal garden. Couldn't he sleep more if he had a toothache? No one was forcing him to get up. Mo Baobao blinked and skipped to Duan Yu's side. Uncle Human Snake has been crying all the time when he passed by these past few days. Why, Godfather? Duan Yu pondered for a long time before coming up with an answer with knitted brows. Maybe the toothache caused constipation? Otherwise, why would he have that expression every day? Mo Baobao sighed. I'll stew some soup for him later. He turned around and leaped into the air. The dagger drew an arc as he abruptly jumped into Duan Yu's arms. Godfather made this dagger. It's so useful. It's not bad. Duan Yu smiled as he hugged the child. All right, we're going back. Mother is calling us back for breakfast. Remember to stew red dates and pear soup for Uncle Human Snake later. He was crying a bit pitifully. Chapter 5743. Spring-filled house. After a crisp slap, the hall that was originally filled with singing and dancing instantly quieted down. He saw a woman with a messy hairpin grabbing another woman as she rolled out of the room and down the stairs. She crashed into a nearby pillar with a bam. The man and woman who were chatting and leaning against the railing jumped in fright, and they hastily retreated backwards. Gu Daozhen, you bitch, you actually dared to barge in and steal someone from me. Your Gu family has fucking declined. Declined, understand? You still dare to steal from me. Do you know my Mu family's current status? Ow, you dare to hit my eyes. I'll whip you to death. Second great aunt. There were 2 servants sobbing at the side, calling out to her repeatedly. The little stoic is here. Someone shouted, and 7 to 8 private rooms in the building opened their doors at the same time. A group of handsome men in thin clothes ran down the stairs. They instantly surrounded the little stoic. They all shouted at once, Aya, how long has it been since you came? You heartless little one. Why haven't you come to visit our spring-filled house for so long? Jojo, you're so annoying. Don't you know that 3 days apart feels like 3 autumns? I miss you so much. Sir Jojo glanced at them expressionlessly. Then he waved his small hand and bellowed with a dark expression, Someone, drag her back. Someone immediately went up to grab Mudongni and even advised jokingly, Oh my second great aunt, please don't court death. Her Majesty the Empress has personally come to arrest you. Hurry and come back with me. Second great aunt said indignantly, I haven't finished listening to Mengmeng's song. Don't touch me. I still want to have a long talk with Mengmeng, a candlelight talk, a night, Mengmeng. Second great-aunt Mu Dongni clung to the pillar next to her and howled at the top of her lungs. It was simply unbearable to watch. Arbor's small face was cold as he angrily shouted at the people who were scrambling to pull second great-aunt, "Hurry up! Hurry up and drag her back. What are you waiting for?" This Mu Dongni was so embarrassing that she didn't pick a good day. This Mu Dongni was so troublesome. Who asked her to come to the spring house to pick a fight? Why didn't you pick a place to pick a fight? Did he not know that this place was under Jojo's protection? Mu Dongni shouted angrily, "My niece, my eldest niece. How can you treat your own aunt like this? I'm really just here to listen to the song today. Who would have thought that Gu Daozhen, that old woman?" It's her. You've disturbed my mood of listening to Mingming's music. Don't you think this woman deserves to die? In any case, most of their clansmen are already dead. It doesn't matter if one more dies. Niece, help me kill her. I'll kill you, you noisy bastard. Arbor looked at her expressionlessly. Shut up. Get the hell out of here right now, and I won't argue with you anymore. If you're any later, I'll get angry. Mu Dongni shuddered. It was not easy for her little niece to get angry. She didn't dare to confront Arbor. She nodded quickly, got up, and walked out dejectedly. Who would have thought that Gu Daozhen would actually take 2 steps forward and kick her in the back? Mu Dongni staggered forward a few steps and fell to the ground with a thud. She hurriedly howled and shouted, "Gu Daozhen, you old woman, how dare you hurt me behind my back?" Arbor glanced at her coldly, and someone rushed over and twisted Gu Daozhen's arms behind her back. Gu Daozhen shouted angrily, "What do you want to do? What did I do? Why are you doing this to me? I'm telling you, don't mess around. There are laws in this world. The Empress of the Divine Land came to visit a brothel. I wonder what His Majesty will think when he learns of this." Mu Dongni said angrily, "What? Do you think this is a brothel? I'm telling you, this is a restaurant, not a brothel. Don't slander my beloved Mingming. I'll kill you." 2 handsome young men next to her sobbed, "Sir, how can you slander us like this? We're not a prostitute. We're a restaurant that does decent business. Red dress, green dress, orange dress, yellow dress, blue dress, purple dress, green dress, orange dress, yellow dress, blue dress, purple dress," all ran to Arbor's side and sobbed, "Jojo, someone slandered us. They slapped our faces. What do you think we should do?" Next to them were a few handsome young men who were about to find a rope to hang themselves. They walked back and forth in the hall, trying to find a pillar. "I don't want to live anymore. I don't want to live anymore. I can't live anymore. We've been slandered like this. Don't we feel ashamed? That's right. Who's a brothel man? We are decent men from good families." Arbor's mouth twitched, and he couldn't help but feel speechless. Just as they were making a racket, Fan Meng and Fan Yu walked down the stairs. Fan Meng looked at Arbor with a gentle gaze and said with a smile, "You're here?" Arbor nodded and looked her up and down. Fan Meng's complexion was pretty good today, and she looked quite spirited. "They didn't disturb you, right?" the little stoic asked icily. With this question, the group of handsome young men next to her started wailing even more. We really did. Hey, this is the Mu family's second eldest aunt. She pointed out that our Meng should play the zither for her as soon as she arrived. She also said that she could only eat our food if Meng played the zither next to her. Then, not long after, this Gu Daozhen came again. She kicked and hit, kicking, and even got into a fight with the Mu family's second eldest aunt. The 2 of them rolled down from upstairs to downstairs. We were scared to death. We were really scared to death. Even now, my heart is still thumping nonstop. "Jojo, I want to drink tea to calm my nerves." The corners of Sir Jojo's eyes twitched silently, and then he nodded. "How do you want to punish them?" A handsome young man shouted, "These 2 women's conduct is not good. They must both be chased out." "That's right. Forbid them from coming to our spring house to eat in the future." "That's right. I really don't know if they came to eat or to take liberties with Meng. They're really too abominable." All the handsome young men nodded in unison as they shared a common enemy. Arbor nodded and turned to roar at Mu Dongni. Did you hear that? Don't come here in the future. If I find out that you're here again, I'll have Grandpa break your dog legs. Mu Dongni burst into tears. My feelings for Meng Meng are absolutely sincere. I'm willing to climb a mountain of swords, dive into a sea of fire, fry a pot of boiling oil, and roll on a nail board for him. I'm not afraid of anything, but I can't not see him. Niece, if you don't let me see my Meng Meng, I really won't be able to live another day. The group of handsome young men trembled and silently glanced at her. With a cold expression, Lord Jojo suddenly stepped forward and kicked Gu Daojian. Everyone couldn't help but speechlessly cover their faces. What to do? After so many years, this fellow was still so cute. Just when everyone thought that she couldn't stand Mu Dongni and was about to walk over and hit her, this fellow actually kicked Gu Daojian. Now that they thought about it, how innocent was Gu Daojian? You're not allowed to come here in the future. If I find out that you're here to make trouble again, I'll put you in jail. Lord Jojo raised her voice and shouted. Gu Daojian was furious and snapped. Is there any justice in this? Is there any law? Your Majesty, although your power is greater than the heavens, you can't forbid commoners like us from coming here to eat normally, right? Mu Dongni, however, became spirited and turned to roar at her. So what if I don't allow you to come? I just don't allow you to come. Let me tell you here, Her Majesty the Empress is the law. Even if you scream yourself hoarse, there's no way to reason with her. Fuck, you're making Lord Jojo sound like a bandit. Can you fucking speak properly? Can't you use your brain before speaking? Arbor glanced at Mu Dongni in annoyance. Hey, kick her out too. Mu Dongni's face immediately fell and she looked bitterly at Jojo. Xiao Mu didn't pay any more attention to her and directly waved her hand to have the two of them thrown out. She walked to Fan Meng's side and looked up at her. Your injuries? Fan Meng said with a smile, I've been recuperating for so many days. Ever since you removed the thunder fire, my body has slowly recovered. It's almost healed. Just ignore people like this in the future, Arbor said speechlessly. After all, you're still running a restaurant business? You can't always chase customers away. Fan Meng smiled good-naturedly. Arbor was speechless. Sigh, these transcendents like to stay here and run restaurants. Forget it as long as they were happy. Jojo, come with me. Fan Meng waved at her. The two of them went to a room upstairs and Fan Meng handed her a letter. Recently, the remaining corpse puppets have been cleared out in various places. There may be underground bases in these places. I hope this will be of help to you. Eldest young master told us to organize this in advance. Fan Meng sighed softly. She didn't expect that such a talented eldest young master would actually sleep in a crystal coffin, never to wake up again. Did he know that this day would come? Fan Meng nodded. He guessed that heavenly luck wouldn't last long. There's not much we can do now. I hope this can help you. Xiao Mu tugged at the corner of her mouth. She originally wanted to show him a kind smile, but her small face was still as cold as ever. Fan Meng couldn't resist chuckling. She glanced at the window from the corner of her eye and propped up her chin with one hand as she beamed at her. Since you're here, how about I play a tune for you? Without waiting for Sir Jojo to reply, a chilly voice drifted over from the window. Are you playing a song? Do you want to do a striptease? Whoosh whoosh. Two figures, one black and one white, suddenly appeared inside the room. Fan Meng laughed in spite of herself. His Majesty came to arrest people. Lady Qiao Qiao quickly jumped up and rushed out of the room with her little legs. When the door opened, Ia's dark face turned around and grinned at her. Your Majesty the Empress. Scram. Arbor slammed the door shut with a bang and turned to glance at her husband and Duanyu. She smiled expressionlessly. Duanyu couldn't resist being amused. Is this the House of Spring? Yes, this restaurant's food is very delicious. Sir Jojo ran up and glanced at his husband. Husband, why are you here? Oh, we were just strolling around. We didn't expect to hear someone on the street say that Her Majesty the Empress ran to Spring Full Restaurant to arrest the Mu family's second Mississippi. Duanyu chuckled. Yes, I came to arrest that Mu Dongni. Arbor glanced at the two. Why didn't Rotten Peach Blossom come out with you? Downstairs, Emolienne replied expressionlessly. Arbor raised her hand and stroked the hair by her temples. She turned around and faced him with the back of her head. Then I'll treat you to a meal. This husband of hers was not a simple person at all. Afraid that she would run away, not only did he have Aoyi wait outside the door, but he also placed Rotten Peach Blossom downstairs to block her. What was there to be afraid of? She was here for serious business, not to look for a pretty boy. Why did she need to feel guilty for no reason? Thud 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 thud. A pretty boy was nagging at Aoyi outside. Aya, little brother, why are you blocking my way? I want to see Jojo. I hate you so much. Aoyi's face turned green. Emolienne's face also turned green. Could it be that every time they saw his Charles, these hateful young men in the spring-filled house spoke like this? He really wanted to kill them. Duan Yu chuckled on the side and quickly went up to stop this irascible guy. Hey, calm down, calm down. Thud thud thud. Jojo, it's bad. Something happened outside. Hong-yi, this little flower, called out delicately. Several pretty boys chimed in beside her and said in trembling voices, Someone barged in, snatched her. Emolienne's handsome face darkened. Look, these weak and helpless pretty boys would become like this every time they saw his Qiao. They would run to his Qiao every 2 to 3 days to seek redress and sob. Fuck, they were even more incomparably annoying than those self-reliant Wind Clan members who were mining now. Duan Yu was exasperated as he shouted outside the door, Please, there are a dozen or so transcendence realms among you. Can you rush them yourselves? Can't, my hand will hurt. You'll twist your head. We're so delicate, how can you hit us? I really want to beat you all to death, Duan Yu thought. Then he hastily went up to grab Emolienne's hand. Don't be agitated, don't be agitated. Calm down. It's fine, it's fine. We're going to Seekong Planet tomorrow. We'll stay there for 1.5 years and not come back. Wah wah wah. The pretty boys started crying outside the door. Jojo, you're going to Seekong Planet? But that's our homeland. We're also going to Seekong Planet. Jojo, take us to Seekong Planet. Emolienne glanced at Duan Yu in bewilderment. Look, you mentioned Seekong Planet, so these little bitches also want to go with you. Fuck, simply angering this darling to death. It's fine, it's fine. Duan Yu blinked and suddenly uttered Feng Tribe's first elder Feng Heping's catchphrase. You'll always be the principal husband. Emolienne? Chapter 5744. Was this person still his friend or not? How could he say something like that? Emolienne was so infuriated that he punched him in passing. Duan Yu quickly jumped to the side and looked at him innocently. I said something wrong. I didn't mean it. Emolienne rolled her eyes at him. The banging on the door became louder and louder. Hong-yi was chirping outside the room. Jojo, come out quickly. There's about to be a fight down there. Jojo definitely couldn't sit still, so he quickly stood up and walked out the door. Hence, when she pulled open the door, she saw Aoi's tanned face turn around and grin at her, his teeth appearing especially white. Your Majesty, did this pretty boy disturb you? It's fine, it's fine. I'll just kick him out. What a joke, didn't he see His Majesty give him a look? Seriously, this pretty boy. He kept nagging and causing trouble for His Majesty and Her Majesty when he had nothing better to do. Sir Jojo expressionlessly glanced at them. In the end, he still couldn't get rid of his curiosity, so he coughed lightly and said, Go down and take a look. He had just chased Mu Dongni and Gu Daozhen out, so why were there people so blind to come to Spring House to cause trouble? Could it be that these people had eaten the guts of a leopard? One after another, they always didn't take Sir Jojo's words to heart. When he thought of this, Arbor's face tensed up. He left the room and walked down the stairs with a thud. At this time, the main hall was in a state of chaos. A few servants dressed in household clothes barged in with a ferocious look on their faces, as if they were about to smash something. Huang Lv-Qing and Lan Zi were blocking them, not allowing them to do anything. Lan Ying asked a retainer nicely, Who are you? Why did you barge in? This is a restaurant, don't randomly smash things. You'll have to pay for it if it's damaged. Everything here is expensive. If you can't pay for it when the time comes, you'll have to be sent to the authorities." A few of the servants roared at him fiercely, "Shut up! With a restaurant like yours, I can tell at a glance that you don't do proper business. You actually dare to snatch business from our boss? Are you tired of living?" Lan blinked her eyes and said with an aggrieved face, "How can you say that, guest? How are we not serious? We are all decent people. That's right, we are all men from good families. You? How can you insult us?" A little flower sobbed as she pinched her thumb and middle finger together. The servant looked at them and couldn't help but sneer. "We are here on the orders of our boss. Get out of my way." To put it bluntly, they were here to cause trouble. According to their boss's wishes, they just had to come and smash it. If something were to happen, the boss would naturally back them up. Huang, Lu, Qing, Lan, and Zi all tried to reason with him. "You can't do this. This is robbing. Don't come in and smash things. It's not easy for us to run a small business. I think your restaurant is just hanging a sheep's head to sell dog meat." That servant huffed angrily. "Our boss said that a restaurant like yours shouldn't be opened on Changle Street. Changle Street was a place where every inch of land was worth gold. How could such an immoral restaurant be opened? Ever since this restaurant opened here, because of the men's allure, this restaurant had inexplicably become the best restaurant on the entire street. It was really strange. How could they mess around like this? They didn't want to run their business properly. Instead, they took the crooked path and relied on selling their looks to gain attention. It was simply preposterous. Their boss endured for a month. When he couldn't take it anymore, he ordered them to bring a group of local ruffians over to cause trouble. Qing, Lan, and Zi sniffed and cried out pitifully, "How can you be so unreasonable? You're really a group of bullies, baddies." The more they were so weak and bashful, the more they gave people the feeling that they were easy to bully. Seeing this, the servants and manservants were infuriated for no reason. These indecent men relied on this kind of beauty to attract the attention of a group of love-struck women. That servant thought about how his wife would also run to this spring-full restaurant. He felt like he had been cuckolded. Arbor walked down from upstairs and coldly looked at the chaotic scene in the main hall. "Who are you people?" Jojo coldly shouted. Jojo, the handsome young men in spring-full restaurant all pounced over as if they had seen their pillar of support. Some tugged at Jojo's sleeves. Some stomped their feet and cried in front of her. They all cried out at the same time. "Oh no, someone's here to cause trouble." Mo Lien was instantly speechless. She glanced at them and subconsciously clenched her fists. These bastards were really hateful. He didn't know where they developed this habit. They always liked to act cute and coquettish in front of his Jojo. They didn't even need to act. They were just acting themselves. Every one of them probably felt that as long as Jojo was here, everything could be resolved by her. A burly man walked out from among the servants. He raised his head and disdainfully glanced at the handsome men. "Look at this bunch of good-for-nothings. They actually found a woman to make the decision. What a joke. What, you're not convinced? That's right, we're here to cause trouble today. Don't blame others for being ruthless. If you want to blame someone, blame your restaurant for being so shameless." Jojo, one of the handsome young men, stomped his feet and covered his face as he sobbed, Look, he's actually insulting us like this. How can you say that about me? Who's selling their looks? I'm still a pure and innocent little flower right now." Duan Yu couldn't resist shuddering. When he looked over, he saw Hu Jinshin sitting on the side as if nothing had happened. He was holding a wine cup and drinking with an indifferent expression. This big brother had been sitting here from the start and hadn't made a sound until now. He was just watching this noisy show. Duan Yu couldn't help but be speechless. He knew that this guy was just enjoying the show. Hence, he turned around and walked to Hu Jinshin's side before slowly sitting down. He reached out to take a clean cup and poured himself a cup. Hu Jinshin smiled sarcastically. "I see that Mo Lien, that punk, doesn't look too good." "How could it be good? Look at those 7 flowers, a bunch of orioles and swallows surrounding Jojo. It was obvious that they couldn't be happy, right?" "Oh, right, the 7 flowers said they want to go to Seekong planet with us." Hu Jinshin raised a brow. Is that so? Then Mo Lien agreed. Duan Yu shook his head. No. He couldn't possibly agree. Those Phoenix clansmen following Jojo around was already enough of a nuisance to him. If he had to bring along a bunch of colorful flowers now, Mo Lien would probably be depressed for a year. Hu Jinshin couldn't resist chuckling. Oh, forget it. The more the merrier. We'll see how it goes. If they don't cause such a ruckus, it's fine to bring them along. How could they not cause a ruckus? Duan Yu thought inwardly. Look, they're already so rowdy right now. Sir Jojo walked up and asked with a straight face, "Who's your boss? Call him over for a chat." This person really had no respect for the law, right? Seeing that someone else's business was doing well, he called some local ruffians over to cause trouble. Did he think Sir Jojo was a pushover? Have your boss come over and talk with our boss. If you have any dissatisfaction, feel free to tell our boss. Why do you need to resort to these petty tricks? It's not easy for everyone to run a restaurant. The 7 flowers all chimed in. That servant put his hands on his hips in disdain. Do you think our boss is very idle? How could a big shot like our boss come over to handle such a small matter? Arbor beckoned with his hand, and several hidden guards in black rushed to him and shouted in unison, "This subordinate is here." Everyone couldn't help but facepalm. These hidden guards around Jojo seemed to be getting more and more ridiculous. In the past, Jojo would at least shout, "Where are the crown princess's personal guards?" before they would jump up and answer. Now, they didn't even need Jojo to shout. They would jump up with a wave of his hand. "Throw them out." Jojo pointed at those local ruffians and impatiently ordered. These people were really annoying. She wanted them to call their boss over for a chat, but they were unwilling. They were just small fries, so they couldn't make any decisions. Who knew what they wanted to do by causing a ruckus in front of her restaurant all day long? Jojo, I know. These people must have been sent over by the 5-colored pavilion across the street. A little flower suddenly shouted. This 5-colored pavilion is also a restaurant. But their business isn't as good as ours, so they must be especially jealous. That's why they sent these people over to smash and rob, wanting to ruin our business. Jojo, we can't let this kind of treacherous villain off. Sir Jojo nodded expressionlessly. Then tie them up and take a look at the 5-colored pavilion across the street. When everyone heard that this guy was going to stir up trouble, they cheered repeatedly. The group of little flowers at the side even applauded in high spirits as they all coquettishly said, "Oh, okay." They were just short of writing the word, "stir up trouble," on their faces. Hu Shirchen almost spat out his wine and speechlessly shook his head. They really wanted to see the world plunged into chaos. Look at these transcendent realm cultivators. How idle must they be to be so bored? They were actually overjoyed when they saw people coming to pick a fight. Jojo saw everyone crowding around them as they headed for the 5-colored pavilion across the street. Hu Shirchen couldn't resist twitching his mouth. He turned to look at the fuming Mo Lien and said in amusement, "Don't be angry, don't be angry. We're also going over to take a look." Say, why are you getting angry with them? Aren't they just a bunch of wild flowers and weeds? How can they compare to a house flower like you? Duan Yu almost spat out his wine. He looked back at Mo Lien in amusement and saw that his handsome face had darkened. So funny, why was this guy's words so unpleasant to the ears? Mo Lien inwardly mused. When the trio saw that even the group of diners in the main hall had followed them to the 5-colored pavilion to watch the show, they could only follow them. There were only a few kittens inside the 5-colored pavilion. It was still mealtime, but business was already this bad. It could be imagined that not many people would enter their restaurant normally. No wonder this owner hated Spring Full Restaurant so much that his teeth itched. After all, Spring Full Restaurant was diagonally across from them and could be seen as soon as they looked up. Spring Full Restaurant had customers coming like clouds every day, while they could only wait anxiously for a few birds to arrive. This contrast was seriously too hateful. How could it not be envious? After Arbor and the others entered the 5-colored pavilion, the commotion naturally was extremely grand. Of course, it immediately alerted the owner of the 5-colored pavilion. This owner was white and fat, and all his fat was piled on his belly. When he jumped down from the building and ran down, all the flesh on his body was jiggling. He ran down with an unsightly expression and pointed at Arbor and the others as he shouted angrily, "What are you doing? Are you here to pick a fight? Don't you know whose place this is? Do you know who's in charge of this place? Let me tell you. Our family's 5-colored pavilion's backer is the royal family." Arbor frowned and turned to look at Emo Lien, who had followed them in. Her large eyes were full of accusation and a bit of disdain. The moment Emo Lien met his wife's gaze, he knew what she was thinking. His wife must be scolding him in her heart. It's your family's good-for-nothing thing again, bullying others with the power of others outside. Emo Lien hurriedly squeezed through the group of little flowers and raised his hand to hold his wife's hand. He said with infinite grievance, "I don't know who it is." If he knew who the hell was so daring to pick a fight with his wife, he would definitely not let him off. "Which royal family member? He's quite famous, huh? Tell me and let me know," Sir Jojo asked with a cold expression. She wanted to see which royal family member dared to be so arrogant. When he saw that other people's businesses were doing well, he immediately started smashing and robbing. If Quan Lu Street was filled with such people, then how was this business going to continue? If they smashed whichever business was doing well, and if they found trouble with whichever business was doing well, wouldn't the owner be busy to death? The fair and plump owner looked arrogant. "You don't want to know. You can't imagine how powerful my backer is." As he spoke, he even pointed up with a mysterious expression and raised his chin high. At this moment, a person who looked like a manager walked down. When he saw Arbor and Emo Lien, his face instantly paled. He trembled and was about to slip away when 2 shadow guards ran forward and grabbed him by the collar. That person wailed like a ghost and howled like a wolf. The shadow guards dragged him back and threw him in front of Arbor. That person who looked like a manager was so frightened that his whole body trembled. He repeatedly kowtowed and begged for mercy. Your Majesty, please spare my life. Your Majesty, please spare my life. I was just passing by." That fair and plump owner was so silly that he couldn't help but laugh out loud. "What are you doing, Manager Chow? You really..." He suddenly remembered that this Manager Chow seemed to have called the 2 people in front of him. Your Majesty? Your Majesty?" The fair and plump owner's expression changed in a flash. It couldn't be, right? Your Majesty, Your Majesty? It couldn't be what he was thinking, right? Yet Xiao Mu gazed curiously at that Manager Chow. Do you know me?" The capital was so big, it was normal that he didn't know her. Usually, she would either go out to train or hide in the palace to cultivate and refine talismans and medicine. It was normal that not many people knew her. Chapter 5745. It would be strange if this Manager Chow knew her. This meant that this person had at least seen her once or twice at places like palace banquets. Therefore, this person should be an aristocrat or a servant of an aristocratic family. "Who are you?" Xiao Mu sized him up from head to toe, her gaze full of intimidation. Manager Chow trembled and couldn't complete his sentence. How could he dare to be rash now? His own restaurant had actually encountered this pair of fiends. How could he endure this? If his master knew that things had turned out like this, he would definitely thrash him to death. He could only blame this white and fat manager for not doing his job well. Why did he attract these 2 people without rhyme or reason? Emo Lien's eyes turned cold, and she slanted her gaze. Immediately, someone stepped forward and dragged Steward Chow over. "Answer the question. Speak. Who exactly are you?" Manager Chow was so frightened that his entire body trembled. Frightened by the hidden guard, he immediately confessed. I am from the Prince of Giant Pain's estate," he stammered and couldn't form a coherent sentence. I am the young manager of the Prince of Giant Pain's heir apparent. Greetings to your Majesty, greetings to Her Majesty the Empress." The Prince of Giant Pain's heir apparent? Emo Kun? The stoic queen's small face instantly turned somewhat unsightly. "Giant Pain, you've been quiet for a while, but you're courting disaster again." The little empress said angrily, "You actually dared to cause trouble in my restaurant. You've truly eaten a bear's heart and leopard's guts. Manager Chow was almost about to cry out loud. He was truly too freaking unlucky. Recently, he discovered that this five-colored restaurant was incurring losses every day and couldn't earn any money. He originally came to inspect it on behalf of the heir apparent. He didn't expect to be involved in such a major incident. Steward Chow felt like crying right now. He was truly terrified. Everyone in the capital was aware of Her Majesty the Empress's terror. After a series of face-slapping incidents at the palace banquet, as long as the courtiers weren't brainless, no one dared to provoke this empress. Every time his heir saw this eldest sister-in-law, he also pretended to be a quail. If the heir knew that today's incident had attracted this terrifying fiend, he would definitely thrash him to death. Wu's Steward Chow wiped away his tears and prostrated himself on the ground, crying with all his might, "Nyang Nyang is wise. Your Highness, please be clear about this. Our crown prince, no. I didn't go to Her Highness restaurant to cause trouble. Bring him here." Jojo angrily waved her hand. The shadow guards dragged the group of ruffians forward and threw them to the ground. Suddenly, howls of anguish could be heard everywhere. These people groaned as they were thrown to the ground. Some people were still cursing, "How dare you do this? Do you know who our boss is?" There were also some people who saw the fat boss and scrambled up to him. They hugged his legs and shouted, Boss, you have to uphold justice for us." Those orioles and swallows in the opposite building actually dared to capture them and bring them to the five-colored tower for a confrontation? Did they take the wrong medicine? Do you know who opened this five-colored restaurant? That was the property of the Jian Pain Wang family. Did they even dare to provoke a relative of the royal family? Those ruffians howled as they were pressed to the ground. "Boss, save us! Boss, save us!" Arbor looked at them and sneered, "Go invite the Crown Prince of Jian Pain over." Everyone present inexplicably trembled slightly. They didn't know why, but they just had a bad premonition. Soon enough, the Crown Prince of Jian Pain was invited over by two shadow guards. This guy probably looked like he had just woken up, as his eyes were hazy and sleepy. Suddenly, he was brought to this five-colored restaurant and handed over to the Crown Princess. The Crown Prince of Jian Pain became much more energetic. He knelt on the ground with a plop. When he saw Jojo, he didn't care about anything else and started howling, "Sister-in-law, sister-in-law. It's been a long time since I saw you, sister-in-law. Why did you come to little brother's restaurant today? It's all little brother's fault for being uninformed. I didn't know that big brother and sister-in-law were here." He cursed and turned to kick Steward Chow. "What are you brats doing? Why didn't you inform me that big brother and sister-in-law were here? Sister-in-law." It was as if this fellow had been possessed by a drama queen. He rolled to Xiao Mu's side and exclaimed, "If younger brother had known earlier that eldest sister-in-law was coming to my small rundown restaurant for an inspection, he definitely would have followed you the entire way." Sir Jojo saw that he had said so much. She threw him two words very calmly. Everyone couldn't help but twitch their mouths. Mo Lien couldn't bear to look at this Crown Prince of Jian Pain's beastly appearance. Was this still a member of the Mo family? How did the Mo family produce such a simple-minded thing? Sister-in-law. Mo Kuan widened his dog eyes and blinked at her. "Sister-in-law, why did you suddenly visit our five-colored restaurant? Are you not feeling well after eating the dishes? If you have any opinions, feel free to raise them. Just treat it as your own home." Arbor looked down at him expressionlessly. To be honest, this guy's bootlicking was almost unbearable to look at. If it weren't for her husband's face, she wished that she could slap him and wipe away that silly smile on his face. Looking at him was really too worrisome. How could this silly child be so silly? Normally, he looked like a normal person. Why did she always feel that he had become silly in front of her? "Do you know why I'm here today?" Arbor glanced at him and asked coldly. Crown Prince of Jian Pain hurriedly shook his head. "Sister-in-law, just say what you want to say." "That restaurant across the street." Arbor pointed in that direction. "Do you know who opened it?" Crown Prince of Jian Pain shook his head again. Then, his eyes suddenly lit up and he hurriedly said fawningly, "Sister-in-law, is this restaurant opened by you?" Sir Jojo nodded. "Yes, it's opened by me. But just now, your family's fat manager sent a bunch of people to smash my restaurant. He even said that he could do whatever he wanted with your backing. The fat manager's forehead was drenched in cold sweat. Beside him, Manager Chow was also quite frightened. He hurriedly wiped his sweat with his sleeve and lay there trembling, not even daring to breathe loudly. Crown Prince of Giant Pain's face darkened. What? They actually dared to be so bold. This bunch of shameless dogs. They actually dared to cause trouble at sister-in-law's restaurant? This is simply preposterous. Sister-in-law, don't worry. I will definitely give you a complete explanation for this matter. Crown Prince of Giant Pain said with righteous indignation. These shameless dogs actually dared to falsify my orders and run amok on Changle Street. Sister-in-law, don't worry. I know what to do. As soon as he finished speaking, the Crown Prince of Giant Pain gazed coldly at the white and fat manager and said furiously, "You dog. I've given you the management of the 5-color pavilion and even allowed you to become half the owner. Is this how you repay me? Is this how you usually ride roughshod over others and use a chicken feather as an arrow to command? Do you know whose world this Dragon Flame City belongs to? That's Big Brother and sister-in-law's world. You actually dared to court death like this. Then really no one can save you." The fat manager had long been scared out of his wits. When he heard this, he hurriedly lay there and begged for mercy, wailing to the heavens. Your Majesty! Your Majesty, this lowly one knows his mistake. This lowly one should never have had such crooked thoughts. This lowly one shouldn't have been jealous of Spring Full House's good business and used those despicable methods. Your Majesty, please be magnanimous and forgive this lowly one this time. Without waiting for Jojo to speak, Crown Prince of Giant Pain jumped up and slapped him across the face. You stinking shameless thing. You've already done such a shameless thing, and you still want Her Majesty to let you off? Let me tell you, today's matter won't be settled peacefully. Even if Her Majesty is magnanimous and willing to let you off, I won't let you off. You brat, you're dead meat, do you know that? Doing such a heartless thing, you've simply disgraced this Crown Prince. The fat man cried out miserably, Crown Prince, please spare me, Crown Prince, please spare me. This lowly one won't dare to do it again. Crown Prince, please spare this lowly one's worthless life. Crown Prince of Giant Pain snorted coldly and suddenly snatched a sword from the hand of a nearby Imperial Guard. This guy was like a drama queen, shouting, "Die!" and placing the sword on the fat man's neck. The fat man fell to the ground in fright, his legs trembling incessantly as he cried out shakily, Crown Prince, don't kill my Crown Prince." Arbor speechlessly glanced at them. With a glance, a hidden guard understood and stepped forward to separate Crown Prince of Giant Pain's hand that was holding the sword. "What are you doing?" Sir Jojo unhappily glared at him. "Eldest sister-in-law, this little brother will deal with him right now." "It's not to that extent yet." Arbor pursed his lips and glared at him. He definitely had to teach him a lesson, but there was no need to take his life. This person was just a little greedy. But his crime didn't warrant death. Emo-kun. Jojo called out his name. Crown Prince of Giant Pain jumped in fright and scrambled to her side, nodding madly like a chick pecking at rice. "Eldest sister-in-law, tell me. As long as eldest sister-in-law instructs, this little brother won't disobey." When everyone saw his appearance, they couldn't help but get angry. This guy was too fawning over their Jojo. This appearance clearly showed that after being taught a lesson by Jojo several times, he was completely convinced and couldn't muster up any thoughts of resistance. "From now on, you can't use this person as a shopkeeper anymore." Crown Prince of Giant Pain heaved a sigh of relief and nodded repeatedly. Of course. After seeing a ghost, how could one not be afraid of darkness? How would I dare to use this kind of person? Eldest sister-in-law, don't worry. This little brother will definitely carefully examine their moral character before using them in the future. I definitely won't let this kind of thing happen again. Arbor made a sound of assent and looked at him with a gaze that said, "This child is worth teaching. You indeed have to carefully examine people before doing things. You can't always be a hands-off shopkeeper, do you understand?" This guy put on the dignity of a eldest sister-in-law quite seriously. However, her husband couldn't help but twitch his mouth repeatedly. He inwardly said, "My wife is actually a hands-off shopkeeper who doesn't care about big or small matters all day long." However, Mo Lien definitely wouldn't expose his wife's shortcomings like this. He would definitely agree with whatever his wife said with both hands and feet. Since his wife wanted to teach his younger brother a lesson now, then he would definitely add fuel to the fire. If his wife found it strenuous to fight alone, he could accompany his wife. Afterwards, he would drag his younger brother over and fiercely teach him a lesson. "Why haven't I seen your father recently? What has he been busy with?" the little stoic couldn't resist asking. Crown Prince of Giantpain's heart instantly thumped, and he inwardly wondered if his father had offended Her Majesty the Empress in some way recently again. Crown Prince of Giantpain wiped the cold sweat that broke out on his forehead and asked pitifully, "Eldest sister-in-law, is it that my father hasn't paid you the balance?" Mo Lien couldn't help but twitch her mouth. Looking at her younger brother's disappointing appearance, Mo Lien truly wished for nothing more than to rush up and kick him to the ground. "Eldest sister-in-law, don't worry. That was a decree issued by the retired emperor previously. Eldest sister-in-law, since you've received the decree to collect the debt, our Prince of Giantpain's estate will pay it back even if we have to sell everything we have. It's just that the time might be a bit long." Arbor didn't have any expression on his face, but his heart was in turmoil, and he let out 3 long howls. Was there something wrong with Mo-kun? How many years had it been? Did she look like the kind of person who would take it to heart and haggle over every detail? Wasn't that matter in the past long ago? What did he mean by bringing it up again now? The little stoic asked icily, "Could it be that your father has been busy recently to raise funds?" Everyone couldn't help but burst into laughter. They inwardly thought that this little fellow was too hard to explain in a few words. Yes, Mo-kun replied while trembling with fear, his head drenched in sweat. When Arbor saw his panicked appearance, he pondered and said, "Forget it, I won't talk about the old Crown Prince of Giantpain's matter with you today. You can go back after you settle this matter." The Crown Prince of Giantpain didn't expect the matter to be resolved so easily. Did his sister-in-law have a change of heart? She actually didn't find someone to beat him up. This guy sneaked a glance at his sister-in-law. He didn't know why, but looking at his sister-in-law now, he felt that she was increasingly benevolent and kind. In short, you have to be more reliable in the future. Don't go around bullying men and women and oppressing good citizens. You have to let me know if you've done anything out of line. Be careful. Mo-kun nodded vigorously. "Yes. Eldest sister-in-law, don't worry. I've already turned over a new leaf these past few years and stopped doing things like bullying men and women." Mo-kun cracked a smile. "Don't worry, eldest sister-in-law. I'm determined to be a good person and will definitely learn from you and eldest brother." The little stoic nodded expressionlessly and coolly swept a glance at the local ruffians and hoodlums in front of her. Mo-kun broke out in a cold sweat again and hastily said, "Eldest sister-in-law, leave these people to me. I'll definitely educate them properly and guide them doing good." The little stoic was completely unaware of Mo-kun's plans and gave an indifferent. She indeed didn't want to care about this kind of trivial matter, so it couldn't be better if Mo-kun took the initiative to take over. "In a few days, your eldest brother and I will be going to Seekong Planet for a while. You, as well as those cousins of yours, behave properly, okay? You have to restrain yourselves and don't make mistakes, let alone run amok. You have to listen to the old prince in all matters, understand?" Everyone couldn't resist bursting into laughter. Under the afternoon sun, the little stoic sat in an armchair and expressionlessly taught Mo-kun how to behave properly. Chapter 5746. Mo Lien was a bit delighted to see this. She truly was a sister-in-law who worried herself to death for her younger brothers. His Jojo was really cuter the more he looked at her. "All right, you can leave if there's nothing else." Yes. Mo-kun was so grateful that he wanted to cry. He nodded repeatedly and went up to kick that fair and plump shopkeeper. "Hurry and take away all these people you called over." The group of repulsive people scurried away with the king of Giantpain's heir with distressed expressions. Along the way, the sound of the king of giant pain's air punching could be heard, mixed with a string of anguished cries. Arbor speechlessly shook her head. Emo-kun, this child, had matured a lot in recent years. Even his father, the old king of giant pain, had been praised by the old king, Emo Lufone. She didn't expect that these repulsive people from the Emo family could also be trained well. Aya, the matter is resolved. Then we should also go back and pack our things as soon as possible. Hong-yi waved her satin as she exclaimed in shock. The group of little flowers repeatedly agreed and waved their claws at Arbor. Jojo, then we'll be leaving first. Remember to take us with you on the day we return to Seekong Planet. Arbor reflexively turned to look at her husband. Sure enough, she saw Jojo's lotus glaring at the 7 flowers with a dark expression. Fan Meng walked up and curtsied with a grin. Your Majesty, then we'll be returning first. Xiao Mu nodded her small head. Her small face was taut in all seriousness, without any extra expression. Fan Meng turned around and then walked up to Emolien to curtsy. Your Majesty, please take care of us in the future. Emolien. This time, the wildflowers and weeds were purposely here to anger him. This fool actually dared to walk up to him innocently and ask him to take care of her with a grin. Ha! Duan Yu suppressed his laughter and hastily turned to look at Emolien's complexion. As expected, her face was as black as charcoal. Meanwhile, Ma Yingchen nodded repeatedly in agreement. But go. Pack your things properly and don't leave anything behind. It's no problem to close the restaurant for a while. Emolien turned to glare at him. Fan Meng, on the other hand, smiled faintly and led the group of beautiful men who were talking excitedly away. Seeing Emolien's pair of phoenix eyes staring straight at him, Ma Shurchen couldn't help but smile embarrassedly. Him? I think they're quite sincere. Emolien threw out a bright red flame, and Ma Shurchen dodged in shock. Heavens, Emolien, how can you attack your own brother? I've been in your water and in your fire. They were brothers who had gone through the Tower of Punishment and exploded in the underground abyss. They had gone through life and death together. Roar, someone cried out anxiously as he dodged several clusters of red flames. Jojo, look at him, Emolien hit me again. Yuan Shurchen cried out pitifully. Don't hit me! Jojo shouted, and her small hands reached into her sleeves. Duan Yu's eyelid twitched and he quickly stopped the two of them. He quietly muttered, hurry and stop. She's going to make us copy quotes again. The 3 of them. Today's weather is really good. Yuan Shurchen suddenly held up a small bright red paper umbrella and blocked the sun above her head. Emolien also hastily stopped. She had no place to put her hand that had attacked, so she could only pat Duan Yu's shoulder. How about we go out for a stroll? That's right. Since we're already out, let's walk around. Arbor expressionlessly stood up from the wooden armchair and shook his head weakly. He looked up at the sky and sighed deeply. Sighed. When will these days of chaos end? Emolien floated to her side in a flash and couldn't resist laughing out loud when she saw her like this. I think there will be no end to these days of chaos. Yuan Shurchen also couldn't resist laughing. Who's noisy, huh? I'm not noisy. The most noisy one is Emolien. Isn't that so? Forget it. Jojo sighed with a resigned expression. I can still endure it. The 3 of them couldn't resist guffawing. At this time, Changle Avenue had already regained its former splendor, prosperity, and peace. The people shuttling through the streets were all in high spirits and full of smiles. The shelves on both sides were filled with dazzling lineups, and it was simply too much to take in at a glance. A strange sight appeared on the street. From time to time, 3 beautiful men would linger in front of a certain stall. Emolien, buy this. This fan looks good. Emolien, buy this. This bracelet is not bad. I can give it to my Jojo. Emolien, fuck, Emolien isn't your money bag. What makes you think that Emolien has to pay for everything when shopping? Hence, many people who strolled through the stalls were muttering in their minds. Why does this name Emolien feel a little familiar? Get out of the way, get out of the way. Get out of the way. The crowd in front suddenly exclaimed in shock. Many people dodged to the sides. Sir Jojo was walking in front of them, looking left and right, and occasionally touching the things on the street stalls. Now that he suddenly heard the exclamations from the opposite side, he stopped in his tracks. Mo Lien and the other two were looking at a small floral umbrella at a stall. Yes, it was that fellow Shu Chen, who said that he wanted to buy a few more umbrellas to use. When they heard the exclamations, they looked up and saw a beggar in tattered clothes. He kept turning his head as he ran and stumbled towards Jojo. The three of them hurriedly flew forward. However, Jojo had already retreated a few steps and landed beside them with a whoosh. The beggar suddenly lost his strength and fell heavily to the ground. The oil paper bag in his arms also fell to the ground, and 2 or 3 white buns rolled out from it. 2 people caught up from behind. They were flustered and exasperated, cursing and swearing, and were about to kick him. However, the beggar rushed forward a few steps and threw himself on the white buns. He picked up 2 of them and stuffed them into his mouth. The 2 people who caught up were so angry that they laughed. One of the young men went up and kicked the beggar twice. "Stinky beggar, you're so poor that you're crazy. You actually dare to steal my things. This person must be crazy. He just bought the buns," and the moment he turned around, the beggar pounced on him and snatched them away. Speaking of which, the strength of this beggar in an instant was not bad. They wondered if he used to be a cultivator. But as long as he had a bit of cultivation, he wouldn't be in such a miserable state, right? The 2 people wanted to go up and beat the beggar up, but they saw many busybodies surrounding them, pointing at them. The beggar's face was unkempt, so they couldn't see his face clearly. He was lying there, picking up the white buns on the ground and biting with all his might. Mo Lien couldn't help but raise her eyebrows. She raised her hand and grabbed Jojo's hand. "Jojo, there's nothing to see. Let's go." Arbor nodded. She glanced at the beggar, but didn't say anything. She followed Mo Lien and was about to leave. Unexpectedly, when the beggar heard Mo Lien's voice, his head suddenly twitched. It was as if he had been provoked by something. He pounced at their feet like a madman. Stay Up Late leaped forward and landed a kick on the man. The beggar couldn't get close. Stay Up Late's kick sent him rolling more than 10 steps away. Everyone saw that he was dirty and smelly. They hurriedly dodged, afraid that he would touch them. Arbor's lips curled coldly. "I know who he is." She suddenly said this. Mo Lien couldn't help but laugh. Look, he didn't want to be a human. Why did he have to be a dog? These days were all chosen by him. Arbor naturally didn't sympathize with the beggar. She looked at him coldly. "I didn't expect him to end up like this." "Who is this beggar?" It was Mo Shikong, the Prince of Zheng whom Jojo had met not long ago. Jojo remembered that the last time he saw him, it was at Tianyun's headquarters. He had mixed in with a bunch of black troopers and was willing to be Tianyun's lackey. Although the corpse poison in his body had been cured, he was only left with 10 or 20% of his cultivation. Arbor had taken a look at him just now. She knew that he probably couldn't use the little bit of divine power he had left. His body was too weak. Although he could still live, it was better to die than to live like this. Mo Shikong's body wriggled slightly. He used all his strength to move towards Mo Lien and Arbor. He wanted to tell them that he knew he was wrong. He didn't want to court death anymore. He wanted to go back. He wanted to go back and continue to be Prince Zheng. Even if he lost his cultivation, as long as he had the title of Prince Zheng, he could still live a carefree life. He didn't have to sleep in the open. He didn't have to be like this, worrying about his next meal. Every time he used all his strength to crawl back to Prince Zheng's residence, he couldn't help but cry when he saw the tightly shut red door. His days were so good back then. Why didn't he cherish them? Aoyi went forward to check. "Master, his tongue seems to have been dug out." Mo Lien nodded and said faintly, "Yes, it was probably done by Tianyun's people." Tianyun had always been so cruel to useless trash. But this had nothing to do with the couple. Mo Shikong's current situation was all thanks to him courting death all the way. "Jojo, this is the bracelet I bought for you." Ma Shichen beamed as she handed the little fellow a flower-shaped bracelet. Mo Lien expressionlessly replied, "My husband paid for it." "Jojo, this fan is also pretty. I'll give it to you, Jojo." Duan Yu handed her a small sandalwood fan. Mo Lien added, and it was your husband who paid for it. The two glared at her, but Mo Lien gave them a look that said, figure it out yourself. Then, she held Jojo's hand and walked forward. Jojo, those two glared at me just now. So bad. Jojo sighed and looked up at the sky again. Men are all childish ghosts. Mo Shikong crawled strenuously on the ground, wanting to chase after them. He really wanted to hug that younger brother's leg and tearfully complain about his remorse. He really wanted to let others know that he really regretted it. However, he couldn't crawl out of the crowd at all. He could only watch helplessly as those people's figures gradually disappeared from his sight. Arbor glanced back and couldn't help but scoff. Why do I feel like his expression seems to be a bit regretful? Only a fool wouldn't regret it, right? Aoyi thought to himself. Mo Shikong, the Prince of Zheng, really knew how to play. He played himself all the way to the bottom of the valley. Once he fell in, he couldn't climb up again. The next day, Dao Wuji received a great gift from His Majesty in a courtyard in the southern part of the city. The edict-delivering eunuch said very politely, pass down His Majesty's decree to bestow 13 beauties to venerable immortal Dao Wuji. After saying that, he hurriedly waved his hand, and the 13 graceful beauties took a few steps forward in unison, winking at him and posing their bodies in front of him. Dao Wuji almost cried because of their ugliness. How could these 13 be called beauties? Weren't they all aunties? Don't come over, don't come over. If you come over, I'm going to scream. Aya, husband, look at your stupid face. We're beauties bestowed to you by His Majesty. That's right, what are you screaming for? Even if you scream yourself hoarse, no one will pay attention to you. Husband, a night of spring is worth 1,000 gold. Let's go quickly. Dao Wuji was so frightened that he repeatedly shouted, I don't want a wife, I don't want one. Little Tai Sui sat in the outer courtyard, listening to the wailing and howling inside. He couldn't help but shake his head. You're really mean. How many years ago was that? You're actually still thinking about it. Mo Lien pretended to be puzzled. What do you mean? Little Tai Sui rolled his eyes. Wasn't there once when Dao Wuji mocked you for being a henpecked husband and was beaten up by Jojo? He even boasted that he would marry 100 beauties when he returned to China in the future. Then you remembered what he said, and now you want to take revenge on him? Mo Lien looked innocent. Do I look like the kind of person who would do such a boring thing? You do. Little Tai Sui gave her a look of absolute certainty. You're 10,000 times more boring than Jojo. Bah! Mo Lien snorted and pointed inside. Listen. Big brother, I was wrong, big brother. Big brother, I'll go to Seekong Planet with you. Big brother, take me to Seekong Planet. Mo Lien winked at Little Tai Sui. Isn't it settled now? Little Tai Sui rolled his eyes several times. Dao Wuji is really unlucky to have made such a mean friend like you. I mean, someone's putting up an image talisman array inside. Mo Lien threw him a look that said, figure it out yourself. Shurchen? Little Tai Sui exclaimed. Holy shit, he's 100 times more mean than you. Of course. Mo Lien stood up and flicked her sleeves. Jojo said that single dogs are more boring. Little Tai Sui glared at her. It looks like it's going to rain. I'm going back to the palace first. Jojo is still waiting for me to go back and have dinner with her. Get lost. Pack your things. We'll set off tomorrow. Get lost. What the hell am I packing for? Son, what are you doing? Mom, there are too many spiritual bamboo shoots growing in the ground. I'm digging some out and bringing them to Grandpa and Grandma. Mom, Grandpa and Grandma on Seekong Planet have never seen me. Will they like me? Little Dumpling is so cute. Everyone will love him. Little Mo Shao grinned and bounced into Arbor's arms, rubbing his little head. Then let's go quickly. Chapter 5747. Quick. Pull it up. Aya, don't push it. It's just a low-level lousy fish. Is there a need to be so anxious? Isn't this just food? You guys are really crazy. You won't even let off a black-level little beast. I'm ashamed to be associated with you guys. The Peach Blossom Divine Venerable fanned himself with a golden-red fan and leaned against the railing in disdain. He rolled his eyes in annoyance. But, you can say that now, but can you not eat it later? Tisk, if I don't eat it, wouldn't I be at a disadvantage? That won't do. The Peach Blossom Divine Venerable fanned himself and pointed at the fish that kept scuttling up. Quick, let's just catch them all. Shameless. Everyone scolded him. How is that shameless? Isn't it just eating? He-Chen's voice faded as his gaze darted back and forth in the dark green lake. Look, isn't there someone floating there? There's no one there. Let me see. The red-clothed and green-clothed people fought to squeeze to the railing. Holy Sun Mi-Yen, who was at the side, brushed his clothes in annoyance and snorted. Simply disgraceful. Jojo. Mo Lien burrowed out of the ship's cabin with a handful of roasted, colorful divine fish in his hand. He looked around the ship's deck, but he didn't see his wife. There's food. The Peach Blossom Divine Venerable floated over and took a roasted fish. He took a bite. The taste is not bad. There's food, there's food. Everyone gathered around and took one piece of meat while they were at it. Mo Lien hurriedly put the fish away. Bastards, this is all for my wife. These people were shameless. Shameless, shameless. We've been talking for so long, but Jojo hasn't returned. Jojo took the small boat to pick up Xiao Donzi and the others. This roasted fish is really not bad. Mo Lien's culinary skills are getting better and better. Let him cook in the future, okay? I think your suggestion is especially good. They're back. Princess Wushuang shouted. Everyone turned to look. Duan Yu's figure flashed, and he picked up the little dumpling and leaped onto the large ship from the small skiff. Jojo, you're finally back. I roasted more than 10 fish, but they were all snatched away by Rotten Peach Blossom, Mi-Yen, and your dark underworld Big Green, Little Red, and Chirp. That's the only one left. It was left behind when I snatched food from the tiger's mouth. Arbor's eyes lit up. He stuck his head out and took a bite. His eyes were filled with nostalgia. Mother said that as a mother, you have to be sensible. It's better to leave it for our son. The corners of Mo Lien's mouth twitched. He couldn't help but smile. Look at how aggrieved his wife was. The group of people behind him also burst into laughter and couldn't help but laugh. Little Mo Xiao reached out and took the grilled fish from his father's hand. He took a small bite and put it in his mother's mouth. Mother, Suddenly, the lake surged, and a strange two-headed fish emerged from the lake, roaring. Hong Yi and Lu Yi, who were leaning against the railing, quickly reached out and patted their chests. Oh my God, you scared me. Why is it a small level 3 mystic beast? What's it roaring for? It actually got excited when we ignored it. Fish it up too and roast it together. While everyone was talking at once, Hong Yi suddenly covered her mouth as if recalling something. Hey, didn't we see a person floating on the water? Why didn't we see anything after that? Everyone, that's right. Everyone was busy snatching the colorful divine fish and chatting as they ate, so they inexplicably forgot about the person floating on the water. Who exactly is it? At this time, everyone squeezed to the railing and looked into the water. They saw that the figure floating on the water had drifted further away, and fish would occasionally jump out to chase after it. Arbor quickly squeezed past everyone and looked into the distance. He said, "Why don't we fish that person up?" Princess Wushuang scooted to his side and pursed her lips. From what I see, you're not the type to meddle in other people's business. She suddenly became benevolent today. This little stoic wasn't her younger sister, Xiao Lin, who liked to make a fuss about everything. All right, why didn't Xiao Lin, come with us this time? Isn't she like a runaway wild horse now that she's here? 12-year-old Xiao Sun crossed his arms and harumphed. This used to be our territory. Second sister is very familiar with it. Arbor knocked her younger brother's head in amusement and annoyance. You're not allowed to talk about second sister like that. All right, all right. Xiao Sun pursed his lips and tugged Arbor's finger to point into the water. Sister, didn't you say you were going to fish that person up? I'll go. After saying that, he leaped like a swallow through a forest. His toes created a ripple on the water's surface, and he arrived in front of the floating person in a split second. What a bummer! Venerable Peach Blossom Divinity chewed on the colorful divine fish and grumbled, "Why is there a corpse floating in the clear water all of a sudden?" Xiao Sen had already stepped onto the railing with that corpse and gently landed on the deck. "Sister, it seems like she's still alive." He put the person down, and everyone gathered around to take a look. They saw that it was a young girl. She wore coarse hemp clothes, but it couldn't hide her natural beauty. Her eyes were tightly shut, and she had already fainted. There were a few wounds on her arms and legs. She had been bitten by the little mystic beasts in the water, and they were still bleeding. If Xiao Sen hadn't made the prompt decision to jump over to save her, this girl would have floated in the water for a day and 2 nights. Even if she didn't starve to death, she would have been eaten by the mystic beasts in the water. Venerable Peach Blossom Divinity leaned on the side and said lazily, "Hey, don't randomly save people. Who knows what you'll save? What if you save a love-struck fool? I can't stand being pestered by a love-struck fool." Hong Yi, Lu Yi, and the others felt that it was reasonable. They hurriedly stopped watching and retreated. It wasn't like they hadn't encountered this before. They would occasionally save people out of kindness, but they had to repay them with their bodies. How was this appropriate? Xiao Sen couldn't help but be speechless. How can there be such a coincidence? Are all the girls in the world love-struck fools? As soon as he finished speaking, he felt a chill beside him. Turning around, he saw An Wushuang and Arbor glaring at him. "Rascal, say it again if you have the guts." Xiao Sen hurriedly waved his small hands. I'm not talking about you guys. I'm talking about other girls." Alright, stop talking nonsense. Let me poke 2 needles and she'll wake up." Arbor took out his needle bag and poked the girl twice. Cough cough cough. That girl slowly woke up. Her watery eyes fell on Xiao Sen, and she stared without blinking. The group of beautiful men standing on the deck and watching from afar instantly trembled. They called out to Jojo, "Jojo, let's go in first." They told him not to save her, but he still insisted on saving her. As expected, he saved a love-struck fool. They could all guess what that girl would say next. It would definitely be something along the lines of, "Sir, I have no way to repay you for saving my life. I can only repay you with my body." Tricks, it was full of tricks. These people had more or less encountered or heard of such things when they were training in the past. That was why it was said that children were inexperienced and easy to be tricked. But after a few more times, they would know in the future. How good would it be to listen to Big Brother when you have nothing to do? Sigh, how pitiful, how lamentable. Arbor turned around and saw that Hu Shurchen, Mi Yen, 7 Flowers, and the people from the Phoenix clan had all disappeared. Third Fu, who was holding the baby, couldn't help but twitch his lips. He hurriedly grabbed his wife's hand and muttered softly, "Go, go, go. Wife, let's go too." He would leave this turbulent world to eldest brother's family. Anyway, this girl was saved by eldest brother's wife's brother, so he should bear with it. And Wushuang curled her lips in amusement and followed her husband to the cabin. She kept looking back as she walked. The girl who was saved said faintly, "Young master, were you the one who saved me?" Wushuang. Needless to say, Hu Shurchen and the rest had probably been tricked too many times. They could see through this trick at a glance. They even immediately stayed far away. They were all shrewd people. Arbor coughed lightly and suddenly reached out to push the girl's cold forehead. He said coldly, "Don't get the wrong person. Your savior is here. If you want to repay him with your body, you can only do it with me." With that, he took out a piece of paper from his sleeve and slapped it on the girl's face. "Sign it." And Wushuang and Third Fu, who had not gone far, turned around at the same time with the baby in their arms and looked at their Qiao speechlessly. Oh my God, what was Jojo doing? The young girl who was rescued was originally in a daze as she stared infatuatedly at the handsome young master in front of her. Suddenly, someone slapped a piece of paper on her face. When she took it down and took a look, she was so angry that her face turned pale. Slave contract? Arbor stood up indifferently and nodded indifferently. I saved you, so you naturally have to repay me with your body. But I am also a reasonable person. Since I just saved you in passing and gave you 2 injections without using any medicine, the treatment fee is not expensive. Then use half a year of your freedom in exchange for saving your life. Everyone, young Master Qiao Sen's lips twitched. He coughed lightly and stood silently behind his sister. Don't say that the person in this world who could trick his sister was probably not born yet. His sister was always unpredictable, and she would even torture the people who tried to trick her into a pulp. That young girl's pretty face was ashen, and she was so angry that she was trembling. She struggled to sit up and stared fixedly at Xiao Mu like this. It was quite a while before she found her voice again. You want me to be a slave or a servant for as long as half a year? What else? Arbor could not help but be furious. Why else would I save you? You don't know what's good for you. Throw her down. Everyone, Jojo, can you not always be so colorful? It's really hard on the heart. Wait. The girl's entire body was trembling. She hurriedly and angrily retracted her gaze from Qiao Sen and looked at Arbor with trepidation. This young lady, you saving people isn't it a piece of cake? But I don't want to raise my hand now. Arbor shouted angrily at the girl. Hu Shurchen and the others who were watching from the cabin window could not help but burst out laughing. My God, Qiao Sen's brain circuit is really very different from everyone else's. The girl looked at Arbor with hot tears in her eyes. She trembled as she picked up the piece of paper in her hand and cried out sorrowfully, I didn't expect to enter the tiger's den after just leaving the wolf's den. Arbor watched expressionlessly as she signed on the paper. Then he waved at her. Go to the kitchen and prepare some tea. I'll say the ugly words first. Don't do anything boring. My eyes can see everything within 100 miles. The girl stood up with trepidation. She looked back 3 times with hidden bitterness in her eyes as she walked. Arbor waved at the people who were hiding in the window. What are you hiding for? What a joke. With her here, there was nothing she could not solve. It was just a village girl. Wouldn't it be a piece of cake for her? With the slave contract in her hands, this girl would not be able to do anything. And Wu Shuang ran over with a smile. Jojo, you know this person is a love-struck fool. Why did you still save her? I don't know. Arbor rolled his eyes in annoyance. There are plenty of decent girls in this world. And Wu Shuang rubbed her chin. That's true. There were plenty of independent, self-reliant girls in this world. Of course, one could not blame all of them. Hu Shurchen and the others walked out one after another. They blinked and looked at her. Jojo, why did you keep this person by your side? The golems have been using up too many spirit stones recently. I'm trying to save as much as I can. On her crimson firmament blue waves, the helmsman and the handymen who served tea were all golems. Spirit stones were being consumed all the time. In any case, now that there was free labor delivered to her door, it would be a waste not to use it. Other than the 2 or 3 boatman golems who were manning the helm and pulling the sails, she could let the rest of the golems rest. She could just leave all the miscellaneous chores to this girl. If this girl had opened her eyes and said some words of gratitude, she naturally would not have deliberately given her a slave contract to humiliate her. What was hateful was that she actually looked at her 12-year-old brother with eyes full of affection. Simply outrageous audacity. In the future, all the chores of serving tea, mopping the floor, and wiping the stools will be left to her. She had nothing to do anyway. Shouldn't a life-saving grace be repaid with gusto? Don't think that you can be a missy just because you saved her. Arbor snorted and glanced at his brother. Chapter 5748. Qiao Sen followed his sister's caress and shook his head slightly, looking very obedient. This fellow was very interested in how to improve his cultivation now. He was still young, but his talent was not bad. Other than being interested in cultivation, he really wasn't interested in anything else. As for that woman just now, he was even less interested. In any case, he definitely wouldn't like someone who could anger his sister. The girl who was rescued by Arbor was called Li Xinyu. It was said that she escaped from the Li family village. Recently, here on Sikong planet, large batches of zombies had already been more or less cleared out. The ecological environment and national production were gradually recovering. So many villagers chose to return to their previous places of residence. This Li family village and Quoto village were separated by Hulun Mountain. Jojo had been to that village when he was young. It was considered one of the better villages in the vicinity. This Li Xinyu was said to have escaped from her marriage. She seemed to be very dissatisfied with her fiancé, so she ran away overnight and crossed the mountains to go to Quoto village. Who knew that in the dark, she would actually run to the lake at the back of the mountain and accidentally fall down. It wasn't that she wasn't grateful that Arbor's group saved her, but she was also very angry. It was obvious that the people on this ship were either rich or noble. The men were handsome and the women were beautiful. But it seemed that everyone was very unfriendly to her. Everyone spoke harshly to her when they saw her. Other than ordering her to do things, they didn't like to talk to her at all. Sometimes, when she wanted to find someone to talk to, they didn't like to talk to her. Quite a few young and handsome men looked at her as if they had seen the god of plague and hurriedly dispersed. She thought about it and felt that it must be Madame Mo's doing secretly. She had stayed on the ship for 2 days and had basically figured out the relationship between the two of them. Everyone on this ship followed Madame Mo's lead. She had offended Madame Mo on the first day she arrived, so everyone ignored her. Everyone treated her like a servant and ostracized her. The most hateful thing was that this Madame Mo had a very cold personality. If she didn't do well or didn't finish the task, she wouldn't even be given food. For example, on the first day, because she made 2 mistakes while working, she didn't get to eat breakfast and lunch. She was only given 2 steamed buns to chew on for dinner. This was simply outrageous. In Li Xinyu's eyes, Madame Mo was an unreasonable demon. She also wanted to leave, but they were on water, and she couldn't jump into the water. Secondly, whenever she thought of the fat and round husband that her family had found for her heart would be filled with unhappiness. That day, Arbor and the others went ashore. Arbor took the red firmament blue waves back to Fish Orchid Planet, but he did not avoid Li Xinyu. Li Xinyu was dumbfounded by what she saw. She stammered and could not help but ask, "Madam, this ship?" As an ordinary person on Sikong Planet, she could be considered to have seen cultivators and seen other people's inner worlds. However, the inner worlds of normal Xiozha could only hold rations, underwear, and the like. He had never seen anything that could fit an entire ship into it. Li Xinyu couldn't wrap her head around it at all. She couldn't imagine what was going on at all. With her eyesight, she naturally couldn't associate it with a portable spirit domain. Arbor naturally couldn't be bothered to explain it to her. This fellow could do whatever he wanted in a place like the upper 3 continents. He could open his star domain whenever he wanted. So what if someone was jealous? With her current cultivation ability, everyone in the upper 3 continents had to bow down to her, not to mention a place like Sikong Planet in the lower star domain. Could it be that there was someone in the lower star domain who was jealous of her star domain and wanted to snatch it away? Impossible. That was why everyone wanted to climb up and persevere in cultivation, wanting to reach that supreme position. That was the reason. Because once a person reached that position, they could look down on the heavens as they pleased and have no fear. Who cared what other people thought? Jojo was used to doing things his own way now. Seeing that Xiao Mu was ignoring her, Li Xinyu was naturally angry. But of course, she didn't dare to be rash. After interacting with him for 2 days, she clearly understood that this Madame Mo was a person who kept her word. Cultivators with profound cultivation like them weren't people that a mere normal person like her could provoke. But now, she saw with her own eyes that Arbor was so powerful that he could store such an enormous ship into his inner world. Li Xinyu felt a trace of admiration for Arbor in her heart. For the rest of the journey, Li Xinyu kept fawning over Arbor, but Arbor ignored her. He pulled Emolien with one hand and walked toward Quoto village. Third Fu, Wushuang, Duanyu, and Hejechen walked and stopped to look around. Li Xinyu probed Arbor, "Madam, those people we saw on the ship earlier, could it be that you..." She was really about to die from curiosity. Didn't they say that inner worlds could only store inanimate objects? Why was this Madame Mo able to store dozens of living people, including that ship, into her inner world? This was too inconceivable. Those people were sealed in Madame Mo's inner world, but didn't they feel stuffy? Could it be that they could breathe normally? Li Xinyu was perplexed. But Arbor glanced at her coldly. He felt that this Li Xinyu was too talkative. Ever since this person saw that she stored the crimson firmament blue wave into the star domain, she started nagging nonstop and kept beating around the bush, trying to pry into her affairs. She really had no discernment and was extremely annoying. "All right, you can leave now." Arbor waved at her impatiently. Li Xinyu was taken aback, but then she was a bit overjoyed. "Madam, you mean that I can leave now? That indenture contract?" Arbor glanced at her with a sneer. "I told you to leave, so leave. What's with all this nonsense?" Previously on the lake, Arbor wouldn't bully a normal person without any mystic energy no matter what. It was also impossible for him to really throw her back into the water and leave her to fend for herself. Since they were already ashore, they naturally went their separate ways and didn't need to keep in touch. This Li Xinyu only worked on the ship for 2 days from start to end. That was her duty, wasn't it? They even saved her life. Thinking about it this way, Li Xinyu truly got a bargain. Arbor glanced at her impatiently. "What? Do you have anything else to say?" Why was she still hesitating when he told her to leave? What a restless thing. "And Madame Mo, we can be considered master and servant." Chapter 5749. Li Xinyu coyly glanced at Xiao Mu, wanting to say something but hesitating. She stammered, Is there any reward?" Third Fu and his wife looked at her as if she was an idiot. No matter how stupid Li Xinyu was, she could see a trace of disdain and contempt in her eyes. Arbor almost laughed at this stupid woman. Reward? She really dared to ask for it. "Shouldn't I repay you for saving my life?" Xiao Mu grumpily retorted, "I see that you don't have much on you except for your face. How about this? Leave your face behind and let me make a beauty drum. How about that?" Arbor's tone was sinister as he took a step forward. Li Xinyu was so frightened that she fell to the ground. She widened her eyes in shock and looked at her as if she was looking at a monster. There was actually someone in this world who wanted to repay kindness? This Madame Mo was so scary. She actually asked her to leave her face behind as something to repay her kindness. How is this possible? Li Xinyu was so scared that her whole body was trembling. She pushed herself up from the ground and nimbly turned around to run. Li Xinyu knew how powerful Arbor was and didn't dare to say anything else. She ran away dejectedly. She originally thought that since Madame Mo and the rest looked so rich, they would give her a little and her life would be much better in the future. 4 high-level cultivators like them, they had all kinds of good things in the world. As long as they left her some money, she, Li Xinyu, would not have to worry about food and drink for the rest of her life. Who would have thought that Madame Mo would be so cruel and scary, wanting to skin her face so easily? Not only did she chase her away, but she also didn't give her any benefits. To think that she had served them so well these 2 days on the ship. They were really a bunch of ingrates. Li Xinyu was shocked and scared. She crawled away on all fours. Arbor and the rest heard her muttering and cursing along the way. "Preposterous," Mo Lian said in displeasure. "There are really weirdos everywhere." And Wushuang couldn't help but shake her head. He had originally thought that in a small mountain village in the Lower Star region, the ordinary people might be very simple and honest. Who would have thought that he would meet such a strange woman? There are really some strange people everywhere. Just looking at them makes me uncomfortable. Wushuang was speechless. If he had known that this would happen, he would have listened to Reverend Peach Blossom and the others. If he had left them in the lurch, there wouldn't have been so much trouble. It seemed like there wasn't any good karma at all. They had saved an ingrate who kept nagging and trying to pry into their affairs. Everyone could also see the greedy look on his face before he left, wanting to say something but hesitating to do so. He actually wanted some benefits before leaving? What a joke! They were the ones who saved her, yet the one who was saved wanted to reach out and ask for benefits. What kind of nonsense was this? Princess Wushuang curled her lips. Now that the ridiculous woman was gone, she finally felt that the air was fresher. Forget it. Arbor waved his small hand. Let's take a stroll around Quoto village and then leave. She was from the Li's village, so she should be able to go back by herself. You won't be able to see it in the future anyway, so you don't have to worry about it. Jojo, this is the place where my elder brother picked you up back then. What? Arbor pouted unhappily. He didn't pick me up. I was killing someone when he stared at me from across the ditch. I didn't even dare to kill him. Pfft, a ditch? It's just a small mud ditch. Mo Lien's words caused Sir Jojo to throw a punch. Ignore him. Jojo snorted and pulled N Wushuang forward. I'll bring you back to my village to take a look. If a corpse jumps out, we'll get rid of it. Mo Lien and the others couldn't help but laugh. Looking at how he pulled N Wushuang and ran away happily, their gazes softened. Things were really different now. Once Jojo returned to this small village, he relaxed completely. How nice. The section break that he hadn't seen in a long time. Giddy up. Xiao Lin spurred her horse as fast as she could. Seeing that Shijio City was right in front of her, her small face couldn't help but relax. She wanted to go back to her hometown in Shijio City to take a look before her sister and the others. Back then, her family had lived in Shijio City's Pear Blossom Alley for several years. She was happy just thinking about it. She remembered that when she was young, she dug a hole in the court and buried many of her beloved toys inside. She had to dig it out first, and she had to dig it behind her sister and the others' backs. In any case, her sister and the others would probably stay in Quoto village for several days, so there was more than enough time. Just as she was thinking, the fine horse neighed and suddenly raised its front hooves. An arrow landed beside her horse's hooves. Xiao Lin's equestrian skills were excellent, so she only gently pulled the reins and patted the horse to make it jump to the side to calm it down. She turned her head to take a closer look and couldn't help but frown slightly. It turned out that the arrow that shot out just now was just a stray arrow. The other person's target wasn't her or her horse. Sounds of fighting could be heard coming from the Cassia forest behind the slope. That arrow had been shot from the Cassia forest. The person who shot the arrow must have been careless and let the arrow go astray. Xiao Lin dismounted from her horse and nimbly picked up the iron arrow stuck in the ground. She sniffed lightly with her small nose. Oh, this lowly thing even smeared poison on the arrowhead. All these years, she had been training with her sister, so she had learned a lot about distinguishing between medicines. Although she couldn't be said to be very proficient, she knew a little about it. She could identify a very common poison like this with just a sniff. Xiao Lin's large eyes darted around. She held the arrow in her hand and eagerly ran toward Gui Shulin. How could she not watch a show? She wondered if it was because her sister and the others' auras were especially powerful that even small beasts didn't dare to show their faces in front of them. It was truly boring. It was rare to see a fight, so it would be a loss if she didn't watch. Xiao Lin sneaked to the edge of the forest and climbed up the nearest tree with the idea of running away if the situation was bad. This guy had done everything secretly, hiding in the tree to watch the show. Below, two groups of people were fighting to the death. Swords and sabers clashed, and the sounds of roaring were endless. One of the front wheels of a carriage beside them fell off, and the entire carriage flipped over and fell to the ground. A woman wearing a red wedding dress crawled out with difficulty. She was currently staring at the fighting crowd around her with a terrified expression. Xiao Lin blinked her large eyes and subconsciously took out a banana from her inner world. She ate it while watching. When she saw a shocking scene, she hurriedly covered her mouth to hide her cries. Shijio City's gates suddenly opened. Chapter 5750. A group of people was galloping toward them at lightning speed. The woman in the red bridal gown who had fallen to the ground struggled to reach out a hand and cried for help with a face full of horror. A knife suddenly fell and was about to chop her tender arm. An arrow shot out from the side and sent the man's knife flying with a swoosh. The woman in the red bridal gown who was lying on the ground raised her head slightly and saw a young man in black military attire with sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes galloping over. He raised the whip in his hand and swept her up from the ground. Miss Jolin, the onlooker, widened her eyes slightly. She held half a banana in her mouth and looked at the person in surprise. Wasn't this that person? Who was that? Jolin's mind was spinning and her eyes were blinking. Wow, she hadn't seen him for a few years and he had grown to look like a human. And this hero saving the beauty was really soul-stirring. It was perfect. Wait. Jolin's eyes blinked as she watched the man come over valiantly. He used the horsewhip to sweep the woman in the bridal gown up. She had thought that the man was going to sweep the girl into his arms. Who knew that guy actually flung her behind him? The pitiful woman in the wedding dress, who was originally looking at him tenderly and lovingly, was suddenly sent flying by the horsewhip. Her face twisted and turned pale as she screamed involuntarily. Jolin was speechless. What a scam! She stared blankly as the woman's sweet and tender face twisted and changed shape. She flew out in front of her with a whoosh. Of course, the man had thrown her very skillfully. It wasn't that he wanted the woman in the bridal gown to fall to her death. Someone behind her patted the horse and reached out to catch the woman in the bridal gown. But with such a scare, the woman in the bridal gown clearly turned pale and fainted. She would probably be traumatized for the next 2 days. Jolin hurriedly swallowed the banana. Just as she was about to hide, she saw the man suddenly raise his head and shoot a cold and sharp gaze at her hiding place. Damn it, Jolin wasn't prepared. She missed a step and fell down the tree. Just as she was about to straighten her small body, the other party had already leaped up and pounced towards her. Jolin subconsciously threw a punch at him. The other party quickly took over and reached out to hold her waist. His gaze fell on her face. Jolin was slightly taken aback. This kid has grown up quite fast these years. She was actually unable to break free from his grasp? What was going on? This brat, it's you? Mou stared at the struggling little girl and suddenly reached out to grab her high ponytail. Brat, you're back? Where's my big brother? Is my big brother back? He carried her and landed under the tree. Suddenly, his eyes lit up. His cold expression was swept away as he hurriedly reached out to shake Xiaolin. Scram. Xiaolin angrily flung his hand away. She took a deep breath and hurriedly pulled her hair back from his hand. Damned brat. Grabbing my hair as soon as we meet. You're still the same as ever, stubborn and mischievous. Everyone in the army was stunned. After so many years, they had never seen anyone who dared to speak so loudly to their crown prince. Ever since the 12th prince was crowned as crown prince, his actions became more mature and steady. His methods were also similar to Her Highness Emolien's. The courtiers trembled in fear and resentment at the loss of Her Highness Emolien and gradually became more reliant on the 12th prince. The old great king also bit the bullet and gradually handed over all matters to the 12th prince. In less than a year, he began to be a hands-off boss again. Their great king was really a godly person. Fortunately, he had 1 or 2 good sons who could take on great responsibilities. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to live his life. When Her Highness Emolien left, for at least a year, the great king had been dealing with government affairs and causing a ruckus with the courtiers. The courtiers were furious, but the great king was also very resentful. For a while, it was said that the great king pretended to be ill for 3 months and handed over all government affairs to the Empress Dowager. Now, there were secret rumors in the storytelling alley that the Empress Dowager was angry at his incompetence and hated him for being a good-for-nothing. She picked up a whip and gave the great king a good beating. Our old great king really had nothing to say. Just talking about it made him cry. Black Jade suddenly laughed and reached out to grab the little girl's long ponytail. Say, where's my brother? Where's my sister-in-law? Where are they? They don't have the face to see me. Who doesn't have the face to see you? They said they would come back in 3 years. How many years has it been? My precious nephew who I've never met is over 3 years old this year, right? My brother is really a big liar. My sister-in-law too. Jolin's mouth twitched. Hey, didn't they say it would be 5 years? What 5 years? They said they would come back in 3 years. You liars. Didn't they come back in between? Jolin scolded irritably. That's because something happened to your family. Otherwise, if something happened to me, would my black-hearted brother be able to come back in time? Huh, you actually said that about my brother-in-law. Let me tell you, I recorded it all with an image talisman array. I'll play it for him later. Heartless thing. Back then, it wasn't just their Qiao family that was in trouble. Those people from the Shi family of the Divine Province had come for the entire northern Mo. Come to think of it, it was also 3 years ago. Jolin sighed ruefully. At that time, the 14-year-old little 12 had risked his life to run to their Qiao family to protect them. On account of their past friendship, Humph let him off. After 3 years, this fellow was almost 18 years old. His eyes and brows had all grown up. At least he looked more like his brother-in-law and not like those repulsive brothers of his. Black Jade sneered. What are you thinking about? I'm asking you a question. What image talisman array? Is it my sister-in-law's? Give it to me. Why should I give it to you? What's wrong with giving me my sister-in-law's things? That's my older sister. Black Jade snorted. Are you giving it to me or not? If not, I'm going to snatch it. You. She even said that he looked more like his brother-in-law. Crooked, completely crooked. How was this looking more like his brother-in-law? Wasn't this looking more like his older sister? She had completely inherited her elder sister's style of robbing. Xiao Lin, grumpily took out a set of image talisman arrays and threw it at him. She snorted and said, Why are you here? To pick you up. Glib-tongued. Black Jade lowered his head and fiddled with the image talisman array in his hand. After playing with it for a while, he looked up at her with a grin. You don't even call me brother when you see me, and you say I'm glib-tongued? What? Xiao Linner's entire body tensed, and she waved her small fist at him. Chapter 57-51. You should be here to save them, right? Jolin pointed at the group of people who had fallen to the ground in a mess. She glanced at Mou. Then I won't hold you up. I'm leaving first. Just as he was about to leave, Mou grabbed his arm. Where are you going? What does it have to do with you? How is it none of my business? If I don't keep an eye on you, how am I going to find out where big brother and sister-in-law are? Why don't you tell me where big brother and sister-in-law are now, and I'll send someone to pick them up. Jolin threw his hand away in exasperation. Don't pull me to tell you. Jolin felt her body lighten as she was pulled over by that man. If she hadn't steadied herself in the nick of time, she would have really crashed into that person's arms. Despicable fellow. After not seeing him for so many years, he had become even worse. Jolin glared at him fiercely. What do you want? If you don't tell me where big brother and sister-in-law are, I won't let you go. Childish. You're the childish one. Mou snorted and didn't let go of her wrist. You came to Shijiao City, so you must be entering the city. Anyway, we're going the same way, so let's go together. Who wants to go with you? Aren't you busy with something? Your Highness. One of the bodyguards couldn't stand it any longer and hurried over to interrupt. The second princess of Lang Country has fainted. I don't know if she's injured. Mou glared at that person and said rudely, If she's injured, go back to the city and find a doctor. This Highness isn't a doctor, so what can I do to help? That bodyguard was at a loss for words and nodded repeatedly. He hurriedly turned around and waved his hand, leading a few other bodyguards to carry the fainted second princess of Lang Country to one side. Your Highness, the second princess is completely unconscious now. Shouldn't we find a carriage? Mou ignored him and pulled Jolin back. Do you need this Highness to instruct you on such a small matter? Do as you see fit. The guard opened his mouth and forced a smile. He followed Mou and hurried 2 steps forward. Your Highness, that Princess Huai Zhu of the Horde Country, no matter what, is still Imperial Concubine Li's niece. Shouldn't we? Mou took a deep breath and turned around to stare coldly at the guard. You're called Chen Yan, right? I heard that you were promoted to vice captain of the Dragon Saliva Guard yesterday? You're quite fast. Chen Yen immediately lowered his head and smiled embarrassedly. Your Highness is so funny. Do I look like I'm joking with you? Mou sneered at him. Do you know Zheng Ru? In the past, Consort Zheng was more favored than Imperial Consort Li. Do you know what happened in the end? Chen Yen did not dare to raise his head, nor did he dare to meet the Crown Prince's cold gaze. I don't need anyone to teach me how to do things. He lifted his chin coldly and spat out, "Scram." Chen Yen hurriedly retreated a few steps. He did not dare to say anything else that would upset this high and mighty person. Imperial Consort, you should stay in the inner court of the rear residence and take care of your own affairs, big and small. Mou tossed out these words coldly. If a woman wants to reach out to the front court, she will die. Jolin felt uncomfortable when she heard these words. She reached out and flung Mou's hand away. Mou turned his head to take a look and saw the little girl glaring at him with her two round eyes, huffing and puffing with rage. What? He raised his brows without batting an eyelid. With a light snort, he grabbed her hand again. Do you know that your tone is very irritating? Jolin shouted angrily. So what if she's a woman? Look at you. How much do you look down on us women? Stop fooling around. Mou dragged the little girl a few steps forward and pulled her up onto the horse. Who's fooling around with you? What are you doing? Jolin glared at him in exasperation. You dare to tie me up? I'm telling you. If my elder sister comes, she'll definitely smash your big head flat. Let her come first. Mou glared at her and curled his lips in amusement. Oh, you don't have any respect for my elder sister now, do you? Jolin turned to look at him. When she looked up, her head almost bumped into his chin. Mou pressed her little head down with one finger and urged his horse to head back to Shijio City. The group of guards behind him hurriedly followed. Chen Yen gritted his teeth hatefully and hurriedly directed the remaining people to carry the unconscious second princess of Lang Country onto a horse. He then led her along the way and looked after her. Fortunately, this place was not far from Shijio City. He led the second princess of Lang Country's horse and rushed back to Shijio City with a group of guards. It probably took less than an hour. However, His Highness the Crown Prince's attitude toward the second princess was truly too infuriating. He actually disregarded the beautiful and elegant second princess. How could he endure this? Chen Yen carefully escorted the second princess back to Shijio City. As soon as he entered the city, he heard a guard report. His Highness said to arrange for the second princess to rest at the relay station. Then where is His Highness? Chen Yen couldn't help but feel angry. Wasn't His Highness the Crown Prince's mission this time to pick up the second princess? Why did he disappear when they had just picked her up? His Highness said that he doesn't need anyone else to care about his matters. As guards, we only need to protect our master well. We don't need to do anything else. Chen Yen gnashed his teeth. His Highness promised the great king that he would definitely bring the second princess back to the capital safely. After all, everyone has seen the current situation. If Li Country wantonly wants to bring people to kidnap her, without His Highness by the second princess's side to protect her, I'm afraid this matter will be disastrous. That guard didn't wait for him to finish speaking and directly abandoned him, turned around and ran away. That's what His Highness ordered. Bring people to guard the second princess well. Guard? Chen Yen was so angry that his nose was about to become crooked. What guard? Was the second princess of Hao Country a criminal? What guard was there? Didn't he say to protect her? Why did it completely change? On the other side, Mou followed closely behind Xiao Lin and followed her back to the Qiao residence in Pear Blossom Alley. For so many years, there had been people who continued to clean and watch over the Qiao residence. Therefore, when Xiao Lin returned to take a look, the furnishings and decorations were the same as several years ago. There were no changes at all. For a moment, she felt a myriad of emotions. Back then, when they left Quoto Village, their first stop was to settle down in Shijio City. It was also after they entered Shijio City that their families' days slowly improved. In those turbulent years, compared to some homeless people, having a stable city like Shijio City that allowed them to rest and settle down was considered a relatively fortunate thing. Chapter 57-52. Jolin reached out and brushed the familiar things in the courtyard. The furnishings still looked new, and everything in the room looked spotless. The osmanthus tree that she had planted in the courtyard had already grown up and was much taller than her. Everything seemed to be fine. Unfortunately, time had passed in a flash, and when she looked back, it was already a long time ago. Jolin strolled around her small courtyard and stared at a big tree in the middle. Her eyes lit up slightly. She remembered very clearly that she had buried many of her beloved trinkets under this tree back then. She took out a small shovel from her inner world and started digging. After digging for a while, she heard a cold voice behind her. "Digging a dog hole? You're the one digging a dog hole. Your whole family is digging dog holes." Jolin turned and glared at this person. She jumped up from under the tree and handed over the small shovel. "You do it." It would be a waste if she didn't use a male laborer here. Why did she have to dig things up herself? Mou raised his slender eyebrows and curled his lips imperceptibly. He walked to the little girl's side and took the shovel from her hand. "What's buried here? Don't talk nonsense. Just dig." Jolin urged him to get started. She crouched on the side and watched with one hand propping up her chin. Mou dug up a metal object with a few shovels. After all, Shaolin was still young back then. She couldn't have buried things very deep. After peeling off the top layer of soil, a black box was revealed. It didn't feel like gold or jade, but more like it was made of pig iron. Mou shook the box in his hand. There was a small golden lock hanging on it. It also shook in his hand, making a crisp sound. "Stop shaking it." Jolin stood up and bounced up and down. Mou raised the box over his head expressionlessly. Shaolin raised her small hand to grab it but couldn't. She glared at him angrily. "What are you doing? I didn't expect that such a wild little girl could have such a gentle side." "What did you say?" Mou made a small hand gesture. "I still remember when you were in the military camp. You were so small." He pressed down on her height again. "But you're so strong. A few men were knocked down by you in a row." "Again." Jolin angrily pulled at his arm and snatched his precious box from him. She turned her head and made a big face at him. Then she hurriedly hugged the box and ran back into the house. She closed the door behind her with a bang. Mou knocked on the door in amusement. "Contact my brother and see when he can come." "Who will contact you?" "Contact your sister." Xiao Lin complained in his mind. He took out his communication jade talisman and left a message for his sister. "Sister, I ran into that annoying Mou. He asked me when you would arrive." After a while, Xiao Lin flipped over on the bed with the box in her arms. She took out the warm communication jade talisman and glanced at it. A message came from it. "Sister, something came up at the last minute, so we won't be coming over. You and Xiao should return to the capital first. Along the way, you can take a look at the residences we left behind." "Sister, why did you change your mind so suddenly?" Jolin angrily punched her small pillow. Previously, her sister said that she would meet her in Shijio City in a few days and return to the capital together. Why did she change her mind now? She even wanted her to make do with that annoying Mou all the way back to the capital. How annoying was that? Jolin angrily pulled at the corner of her clothes and rolled around on the bed with her box. She took out a small key to open the lock and open the box. She counted her favorite childhood items and giggled nonstop as she looked. Jolin shook a small rattledrum in her hand and laughed uncontrollably. She really didn't expect herself to be so funny at that time. Before she left, she actually buried a batch of these toys in the ground. Now that she thought about it, it was really funny. She flipped over and lay on her back on the bed. She looked up at the small pink flowers embroidered on the soft gauze canopy. "Sigh, I don't know how many days it will take to return to the capital." This fellow mumbled and fell asleep on her stomach. On the other side, Arbor put down the jade communication talisman and turned around to wink at Emolian. "Wife, your husband knows what you're scheming from your little naughty expression." Emolian's eyes lit up. He moved closer to her and whispered to his wife. "What can I be scheming?" Sir Jojo gave him a sideways glance in all seriousness. "Oh right, where's our son? Don't mind him. Let him play next door. Mo Lien smiled and hugged Arbor. Wife, tell me secretly. Are you trying to matchmake Xiao Yu and them? Arbor glanced at him, and the corner of his mouth suddenly twitched. Don't you think that these two people are quite compatible? That's right. Xiao Yu's character is not bad. He's definitely a good choice. That's not necessarily true. Arbor pursed his lips. He looked all right when he was young. Who knows if he'll grow into a crooked melon in a few years. Your Mo family doesn't have many decent people. That Mo Kuan, hey. Seeing that his wife was about to criticize the Mo family again, Mo Lien's mouth twitched. He hurriedly reached out to grab her small arm. You can't say that. We can't overturn the entire boat with one stick, right? Is still all right. What if he's like your father? Your adoptive father is like that. Today this girl, tomorrow that girl. Then wouldn't I be setting a trap for my sister? Don't worry. You will definitely not be as unreliable as Imperial Father. He takes after his mother and her family. Look, the Zhao family is like uncle and the rest. They rarely have concubines. Xiao Mu chuckled, the expression on her small face unchanging. Do you still remember? That Young He. When she was doted on back then, she made me suffer a lot. Yes. Mo Lien nodded repeatedly like a little wife. He followed his wife's lead and scolded, that Young He, she only has herself to blame. Mo Yu is also like this. Then we'll cripple him. Mo Lien switched sides with his wife without hesitation. Arbor glanced at him. For a moment, she couldn't help but chuckle. Mo Lien grinned as he pounced on her and hugged her. He gently shook her body and said softly, Wife, don't worry. Your husband will definitely stand on your side. Not to mention a little Mo Yu, even if it's Imperial Father, if he dares to set us up, I'll set him up again. All right. You're so annoying. Arbor didn't know whether to laugh or cry as she reached out to push his handsome face away. Wife, Mo Lien was just about to move his hands up and down when he saw a small thing flip down from the bed curtain and hang upside down in front of his eyes. Chapter 57-53. The couple's expressions froze on their faces. Both pairs of eyes blinked as they looked at the little boy who was swaying back and forth in front of them. Mo Lien casually picked up a ruler and fiddled with it, wanting to beat her son down from the bed curtains. The little boy opened his arms and looked as if he was begging for his mother to carry him. Arbor hurriedly reached out to pull the little boy into his arms and pushed away the ruler that Mo Lien had taken out. What are you doing? Sir Jojo exclaimed and turned around with his son in his arms. This guy actually dared to hit his son. He really had guts. Wifey. Mo Lien whined pitifully. Look at him, he. This guy was born to take him in. How could it be so coincidental that he appeared between the two of them at such an opportune time? He appeared between the two of them just like that, with a pair of big, clear eyes, blinking innocently. Should he hit him? Arbor reached out to pat his son's small body and turned to look at Mo Lien. He shouted, What are you doing? You must have been like this when you were young. Arbor rolled his eyes at him. You don't know how much your Imperial Father hates you. How is that possible? Otherwise, why would he call you little glutinous rice ball? Mo Lien, you're just like glutinous rice ball. You must have been rolling around Imperial Father and Mother's bed, always annoying them. Do you think Imperial Father likes you now? He doesn't like you at all. Mo Lien, little glutinous rice ball, seemed to know that he had done something wrong. At this moment, he was curled up in his mother's arms obediently and didn't express any opinions. He didn't say anything, and Mo Lien didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This child was very shrewd and especially good at reading people's expressions. Who knew who he took after with such a bad temper? You said that he was lying on the bed curtains in the middle of the night and didn't make a sound. At the crucial moment, this guy fell down with a crash. How wonderful, how perfect. Xiaotuanzi didn't do it on purpose. Mr. Jojo carried his son and ran off the bed. He patted his son's small body gently and turned back to glance at Mo Lien. Don't always bully him. Oh my God, who's bullying who? Mo Lien jumped down from the bed and circled around his wife. Jojo, he's so mean. Don't underestimate him just because he's 3 years old. He knows everything. Xiao Tuanzi is so obedient. He's not bad. The little dumpling nodded and continued to snuggle into his mother's arms. Mo Lien didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She circled the mother and daughter twice. Jojo, do you want me to carry you? No. The mother and daughter shouted at him at the same time. Xiao Xiao turned her back, and the little dumpling also turned her head back. Mo Lien, who was disliked by the mother and daughter, ran towards them with the back of their heads facing her. She wanted to cry but had no tears. I was wrong. I won't call him a bad guy. Wife, don't turn the back of your head to me. Arbor turned his head and glanced at Mo Lien with the same expression as his son. Mo Lien stretched out his hand and simply picked up both mother and son. He turned back while whispering to each other the entire way. He reached out to touch his wife's small face and helplessly glanced at his son who was hugging his mother tightly. His son would appear in front of them in all kinds of strange ways at night. He didn't know if it was his annoying adoptive father who taught him this. He had to go back and find out more about the situation. Rotten peach blossoms were probably involved too. Jolin yawned loudly and got up from her bed. She was in a daze for a moment. She was back. She was back at the Chiao residence in Shijio City's Pear Blossom Alley. It was her first time back after so many years. She didn't sleep until late last night because she was reminiscing about the past. Thinking about how she was reminiscing about the past for so long, Jolin couldn't help but raise her hand and pat her forehead. Few she didn't know who said that when people started to recall the past, it meant that they were old. She jumped out of bed and moved her hands and feet in joy. Jolin reached out to pinch her tender little face. She quickly finished washing up and raised her hand to open the door. Under the ancient tree in the middle of the courtyard, there was a figure standing tall and straight like a pine tree. He turned his head when he heard the door open. There was a faint smile in those bright eyes. Just like the young man she saw before she entered the military camp. His smile was bright and dazzling. Her memories were swept away from a long time ago. She remembered that many years ago, she was only 11 or 12 years old at that time. Shaosun was only 9 or 10 years old. At that time, she accompanied Shaosun to the military camp to gain experience. They met this 13 or 14-year-old young man at the gate. Now, in the blink of an eye, almost 5 or 6 years had passed. Jolin remembered that because Shaosun was young, he was still cute and cute. At the gate of the military camp, he looked like he was about to cry. When he saw that there were outsiders, he immediately put away his sad face and put on a serious expression. Hey, you two were tricked by my sister-in-law, right? I'm Mou, let's get to know each other. Shaosun stammered. Are you my big brother's younger brother? Jolin saw Mou looking at them in confusion. She couldn't help but roll her eyes and say, the big brother he's talking about is your big brother Mo Lien. Then shouldn't he be your brother-in-law? Mou had a curious expression on his face. Oh, he's used to calling me that. This doesn't seem to be the main point. Young man, can you get the main point and be obedient? Jolin turned and walked into the military camp. Just as they stepped through the gate of the military camp, they saw rows of soldiers standing upright and orderly on both sides of the camp. They were mighty and domineering, completely blocking their way into the camp. Yo, are they here to take us down a notch? Mou raised her brows slightly and said with a mocking expression. Little Xiaosun suddenly jumped behind his little sister and asked in a low voice in a panic, Sis, they wouldn't come up and beat us up, right? They wouldn't dare. Jolin raised her brows and snorted softly. Unless they didn't want to live anymore, they wouldn't dare to beat up His Highness the Crown Prince's younger siblings. Then what are they doing, sis? Shaosun pointed pitifully at the 2 rows of mighty and strong soldiers in front of them. In front of them, he was like a little bean sprout. He couldn't even be crushed with a finger. What are you panicking for? Jolin glanced at Mou. Her meaning couldn't be more obvious. Wasn't brother-in-law's younger brother here? Brother-in-law's younger brother should also be some prince. If they didn't let him go up now, who else could? Thus, Xiaosun also looked eagerly at Mou at the side. Mou thought, I'm a few years older than them, and they are also sister-in-law's younger siblings. I have to protect them, right? Thus, he took a step forward and patted his chest. Tell me, how can we enter? Chapter 57-54. Several soldiers thumped their chests heavily at the same time. Their meaning couldn't be more obvious. You'll only enter the military camp if you beat us. Mou rubbed his hands and suddenly swept a kick at the lower body of the soldier closest to him. He was wretched enough. His opponent was not on guard against him at all, and he made a move at once. Therefore, the soldier was caught off guard and was kicked by this guy. His body flew out and landed heavily on the yellow sand. The other soldiers suddenly rushed forward and surrounded Mou. Mou put on a defensive posture and moved his feet lightly. He pointed at the crowd in front of him and shouted, I'm telling you, if you have the guts, fight one-on-one. Don't fucking gang up on me. His fists couldn't fight against four hands. Damn it, he couldn't beat them. Rows of soldiers held their weapons and roared. Their eyes were like wild leopards as they stared at Mou. Mou rubbed his hands nervously. His hands were still in a defensive posture. I'm telling you. Don't mess around. I'm going to put my words in front of you. Fight one-on-one. Otherwise, I won't accept it. What a joke. He wasn't a fool. If he was beaten up by more than 10 rough men, how badly would his handsome face be beaten up? Little Xiaosun gripped his sister's sleeves tightly with excitement and stammered, Sister, why don't we fight together? Hide behind this little brother, and help him. Jolin was speechless. She didn't expect her brother to be such a wretched person. Her brother didn't want to take the lead at all. He only wanted Mou, this fool, to take the lead. Jolin turned to look at her brother and said righteously, We can't do that. They're protecting us now, so they're our temporary allies. Sister said that we have to show some sincerity to our allies. At least, we have to hold our bottom line and not cheat our teammates, right? Xiaosun nodded as if he understood and stuttered, but there are so many people now. How can we not cheat them? Jolin took his brother's hand and patted his chest confidently. Don't worry. I promised our mother that I would accompany you to train, so I will definitely protect you. When Xiaosun heard this, he quickly puffed out his chest and said, I don't need you to protect me. Big brother said that we have to be men. We have to have the spirit and courage to be men. He was willing to take a beating for his sister. Jolin took his brother's hand and patted the arm of a strong man. Hey, please make way, let us in. This guy yelled all the way as he led his younger brother into the encirclement. Mou was being swept back and forth by a muscular man holding a bronze hammer. Mou was hastily dodging the attacks and appeared to be in a fluster. Jolin staggered to Black Jade's side and raised his hand to block the strong man's copper hammer. Her feet sank a few inches into the ground, but her eyes were especially bright and sparkling. Brother, I'll take you on. As he spoke, he threw a punch straight at the man's face. The two of them exchanged a few punches and kicks. The surrounding soldiers couldn't help but be stunned. They didn't expect a young girl to be so fast, and her accuracy and strength weren't weak either. The big man with the bronze hammer was forced back by the little girl in a few moves. Mou couldn't help but be dumbfounded. Oh my God, sister-in-law's sister was also so fierce. That wouldn't do. He couldn't hide his weakness anymore. No matter what, he couldn't lose to sister-in-law's sister and embarrass his big brother. Thinking of this, Mou's speed of attack also increased. The two soldiers who were fighting against them were defeated and fell to the ground in a few moves. Who else is unconvinced? Come up. Jolin shouted in a deep voice. A soldier holding a spear jumped in front of her with a whoosh. On the other side, Mou had just knocked down a person and wanted to rest, but he didn't expect this little girl to come up again. The corner of his mouth couldn't help but twitch slightly. This girl was too honest, completely unlike sister-in-law who was cunning. Couldn't she say a few words first, take the opportunity to rest, and then find someone to fight? They had just fought a fierce battle, and now they had to fight again. Wouldn't that be exhausting? Jolin casually took out a water bottle from her inner world and took a sip. She put the bottle on her waist and hooked her finger at the spear-wielding man. Come. Bang bang bang. Bang bang. Put. Huff, huff, huff. Less than an hour later, Mou, who had taken down 3 soldiers in a row, collapsed on the ground and panted heavily. He looked at the little fellow beside him who was getting more and more energetic as he fought. No, that's not right, that's definitely not right. Ordinary people couldn't continue to have such vigorous mental strength after a few rounds of fighting. There must be something wrong with the little girl's water bottle. Mou stared at the water bottle on Jolin's waist, and his eyes were about to emit green light. Hey, give me a mouthful of water. The little girl's water bottle must be filled with good stuff. Otherwise, how could it be? It was probably some unknown medicinal liquid that sister-in-law had concocted, the kind that could restore one's mental strength after drinking a mouthful. The more Mou thought about it, the more likely it was. He hurriedly waved at the little girl. At this time, Jolin had knocked down another soldier. She turned to look at Mou, curled her lips, and took out a small water bottle from her inner world and threw it over. Mou reached out to take it and waved at Jolin with a smile. Thanks. He uncorked the bottle and took a sip. Then he felt a faint trace of qi flowing through his body, and his body began to gradually recover. No wonder. With this magical water bottle in her hand, it would be easy for the little girl to fight 70 or 80 people, let alone 7 or 8 strong men. Bang! Bang! More than 10 people were knocked down on the field. 2 rows of soldiers were all lying on the ground, holding their stomachs and waists, and looking up at the sky. Mou couldn't help but chuckle and turn to look at Jolin. The little girl was moving her small arms and legs, looking at the soldiers who had fallen on the ground in high spirits. How is it? Do you want to continue? Everyone was lying on the ground and waving their hands, showing their intentions with their actions. Too strong. How could this little girl be so powerful? She directly knocked down 2 rows of soldiers, and she didn't look tired at all. Xiao Xin ran to Jolin cheering and whispered to her, "Sister, if they know that you took the special recovery liquid, I wonder what their expressions will be like." Jolin glanced at him and whispered, "Keep a low profile." Then she threw him a look that said, "You know what I mean." Since they were in such an unfamiliar environment, they had to keep a low profile before they figured out the temperament of these people. Mou stood in the small garden and turned around, a faint smile in his eyes. Chapter 57-55. Jolin's wandering thoughts slowly retracted. Looking at Mou, who was like a verdant orchid tree, he actually felt a trace of absurdity. What was with this inexplicable feeling that it was a lifetime ago? This fellow glanced at him and then moved to the side, skipping forward a few steps. "My older sister said that she had something to do and had me follow you back to the capital first. They will return to the capital later on." Mou's eyes lit up, and he hurriedly moved to Xiaolin's side. Hey, that means I can see my older brother very soon? What kind of wretched expression is that? It doesn't look like you have anything serious to do." Xiaolin glared at him exasperately. "What? You must have something to ask of your older brother. Otherwise, why are you in such a hurry to see him?" "Nonsense." Mou snorted. "Isn't it because I miss my older brother and sister-in-law? They haven't been back for many years. Aren't I in a hurry to catch up with them?" Jolin chuckled. "I also want to see Her Highness the Empress Dowager. If you want to see my grandmother, then I'll take you into the palace to see her." "That's enough." Xiaolin pouted her lips behind him, a look of disdain appearing in her eyes. Seeing her expression, Mou absent-mindedly turned his head to take a look. He saw a graceful woman dressed in red slowly walking towards them. "Is this your wife?" Xiaolin winked at him. "Nonsense." For some reason, Mou abruptly raised his voice and hurriedly denied it. This loud shout startled the unsuspecting Xiaolin, and she glared at him exasperatedly. "What are you shouting for? I just don't like to be wronged." Mou coughed lightly and raised his hand to brush away the strands of hair that had drifted to his face, his expression turning solemn. Imperial Guard Chen Yen accompanied Princess Huai Zhu as they walked forward, greeting Mou one after another. Huai Zhu greets Your Highness the Crown Prince. This lowly one greets Your Highness. Princess, are you all right? You didn't get any fright, right? Mou's voice was indifferent. His question was somewhat absent-minded, and his expression was tense. Princess Huai Zhu curtsied to him again, her voice as soft as a feather brushing through the hearts of everyone present. Thank you for your concern, Your Highness. Huai Zhu was only a little frightened. After drinking tea and sleeping, I feel much better now. Since that's the case, let's set off today. Let me escort the princess back to the capital. Black Jade's expression was neither hot nor cold. Oh, that's right, I'm not worried about you. I'm just asking out of courtesy. Jolin was eating a meat bun under the tree. Hearing his words, he almost spat it out. Stinky girl, you can even choke on a bun. Mou rushed over and quickly patted her back. She then hurriedly called for someone to bring over a cup of tea. Princess Huai Zhu's face instantly turned a myriad of colors. It was unknown whether it was because she had been embarrassed by His Highness's words or because he had left her behind and left her behind. In any case, she was so angry that her little hands trembled slightly. However, she still had to put on the dignified, graceful, and considerate appearance of a princess of the Lang Kingdom. She smiled at Mou reservedly and elegantly. Since Your Highness is busy, Huai Zhu will take her leave first. Mou ignored her. Princess Huai Zhu secretly suppressed the rising anger in her heart. She turned her head and stepped on the ground to move away inch by inch. It took a lot of willpower for her to restrain the urge to turn back and roar. She had to restrain herself and restrain herself. His aunt had already written a letter to warn him that their crown prince was an extremely willful person who could not be tricked at all. She had also secretly warned her to build a good relationship with the crown prince. Because now, everyone in the imperial court, including the old great king, couldn't do anything to him actually. Huai Zhu really wanted to ask her aunt who the old great king could do anything to. She wasn't some ignorant little girl. She had heard a lot about Northern Moi's various affairs. Northern Moi's great king's cowardice wasn't a rumor that had only been circulating for a day or two. That old great king was fortunate to have Her Majesty the Empress Dowager's protection and his son's support. That was why he could reign supreme for so long. Otherwise, he would have to rely on him. Chen Yen accompanied Princess Huai Zhu all the way out, feeling rather indignant. His Highness the Crown Prince is too much. He actually dared to disrespect the princess like this. Why don't you send a message to Her Majesty the Noble Consort and have Her Majesty talk to the Great King and have the Great King knock some sense into the Crown Prince? Princess Huai Zhu swept a glance at Chen Yen. Chen Yen, if I didn't know your true identity, I really wouldn't be able to resist suspecting you of being a spy sent by Northern Moi. Chen Yen was taken aback, and cold sweat instantly dripped down his forehead. I know you are loyal and devoted to Aunt. Otherwise, you wouldn't have incurred His Highness the Crown Prince's cynicism and ridicule. Princess Huai Zhu smiled faintly at him. But you have to remember, Chen Yen, you must never act with undue haste. Everything has to be done step by step, right? I've only just met His Highness the Crown Prince, so it's normal for him to treat me coldly. If I really believed your words and sent a message to Aunt to disrupt the situation, His Majesty the Crown Prince would definitely punish me. If the king really reprimands His Highness because of this matter, Chen Yen, do you think His Highness will be more courteous to me or even less courteous? Chen Yen hung his head, drenched in cold sweat. He hastily cupped his hands and said, it was this subordinate who thought too simply of the matter. A faint light flashed through his lowered eyes. Soon, after sending Princess Huai Zhu to her boudoir, Chen Yen found a secluded place and sent a message to Imperial Concubine Li. Don't worry, Imperial Concubine. Just as Imperial Concubine Li said, the princess is a wise person. This meat bun is quite delicious. Have another one. What? You've already eaten 3. Jolin scolded in annoyance. I only eat 1 meat bun for breakfast. 3 isn't enough for you. You're a pig. Before he could finish the word pig. His voice was still lingering in his mouth when he was silenced by a cup of tea. My sister-in-law left you so many good things. What's wrong with sharing some of them? Come on, have another peach. You're pushing your luck. Jolin shouted angrily after downing a cup of tea. What do you mean pushing my luck? Think about it. You've all gone to the divine land, leaving me alone in this desolate and deserted place. All these years, I've worked hard for the imperial court and the people. Do you think it's been easy for me? Bah. Jolin was almost shocked by his shamelessness. Fuck, you call this a desolate and deserted place? You're a noble crown prince who has people waiting on you everywhere you go. Tell me, what's not comfortable about it? You're shameless. Hurry up, you talk too much. Black Jade reached out and pinched her round cheeks. Chapter 57-56. Xiao Lin angrily swatted his hand away and took out a large, juicy peach from her storage talisman, smashing it heavily into Mou's hand. Mou's eyes brightened, and he put away the peach before standing up. Let's return to the capital this afternoon. You don't have a problem, right? Xiao Lin took out a map and placed it in front of him. Elder sister wants me to inspect the various residences while I'm at it. Let's follow this route back to the capital. Mou took the map and couldn't help but laugh in anger. You'll have to take a big detour to return to the capital. He stared at the little girl with a burning gaze before suddenly curling his lips into a bewitching smile. I understand. Haha. Sure enough, with his graceful appearance and character, how could there be a girl who wouldn't be moved by him? Xiao Lin was doing this on purpose. She was purposely taking him to tour the garden and take a big detour. With this route, they wouldn't be able to return to the capital without 15 days. Xiao Lin just wanted to spend more time with him. Xiao Lin looked at the neurotic man in bewilderment before automatically taking a few steps towards a small tree to avoid Mou's gaze. Thus, when Mou saw this slightly flustered appearance, it further confirmed the self-righteous thoughts in his heart. Mou strode forward and reached out to grab Xiao Lin's small arm. Don't worry, I will definitely cooperate with you. I'll go wherever you say. Even if you want to walk all the way to the southern Shao Kingdom and have us circle around before coming back, I will definitely do as you wish. Xiao Lin looked at him like he was an idiot before hastily withdrawing her small arm. With great difficulty, she managed to pull her arm out of his grasp. Was there something wrong with this person? When their Qiao family purchased properties, they would definitely purchase them within northern Mo's borders. How could they purchase them all the way to a place as far as the southern Shao Kingdom? There was something wrong with his head. Xiao Lin rolled her eyes at him in annoyance before forcefully flinging his hand away. I plan to take a good stroll around our Qiao residence. Don't disturb me. Hey, I'll walk around with you. I'm also familiar with this place. Jolin jogged away angrily. What are you talking about? Jolin huffed. She walked around the house for a while, then called for the old family member who was in charge of the house and gave him a few instructions. Then he went to each room and looked around. Whenever he saw something meaningful, he packed it up and put it into the storage talisman. He silently stayed in the courtyard for half a day until noon, when Mou came again. Jolin was dragged to the front hall by his shouts. She glared at him. What are you doing here again? Mou blinked. Isn't it already time for dinner? According to the eldest sister-in-law's rules, they had to eat when it was mealtime. Xiao Lin had probably learned everything from her sister-in-law. Xiao Lin touched her belly when she heard that. Are you treating me to a meal? Mou nodded. I asked the city lord about it. A new restaurant opened in Shijio City recently, and it said that the food there is quite good. City lord? Xiao Lin was slightly taken aback, and she couldn't help but smile when she saw the two people who came in. City Lord Gu Qingfeng bowed to the two of them and said with a smile, the banquet has already been arranged. Your Highness, second Miss Chiao, allow this subordinate to lead the way. Gu Qingfeng and Mr. Zhang could be considered acquaintances of Xiao Lin. Jolin was a bit happy to meet old friends after a long separation. How have the city lord and Mr. Zhang been recently? Good. Thank you for your concern, second Mississippi. Gu Qingfeng and Zhang Yan smiled and cupped their hands politely. They naturally felt a sense of reverence toward this second Miss Qiao who had ascended to the 3 provinces. With their current eyesight, they couldn't tell what realm this second Miss was in. The 4 of them chatted and laughed. Just as they reached the door, they saw a pink sedan parked by the roadside. A young woman in bright red clothes stood beside the sedan, smiling at Mou. Shaolin shrunk her neck and poked Mou's arm with a finger. "They're here for you." "City Lord Gu, Mr. Zhang, why don't we leave first and let His Highness the Crown Prince accompany Princess Huaizhu?" Before Shaolin could finish speaking, Mou pulled her to his side and held her arm. "What are you doing?" Jolin hurriedly tried to break free, but he failed to do so. "Who do you want this highness to accompany?" Mou glared at her in annoyance. "Let's go." "Hey, I'm creating that opportunity for you." Opportunity." Jolin's face scrunched up in anger as Mou pulled her all the way out of the door. How could this stinky man be so strong? She couldn't break free from him. This situation wasn't normal. Princess Huaizhu, who was standing beside the pink sedan, had just bowed to Mou and called out softly, "Your Highness," when Mou dragged Shaolin and strode past her. This scene was so awkward that City Lord Gu and Mr. Zhang couldn't bear to look at it. They quickly looked away and coughed dryly, pretending not to have seen anything. They quickened their pace and walked past the princess. The gentle smile on Princess Huaizhu's face froze. A hint of viciousness flashed across her palm-sized face. She took a deep breath and quickly adjusted her emotions. She raised her face that was full of smiles and slowly walked up the sedan. She ordered indifferently, "Follow me." "What are you doing?" Shaolin, who was dragged up the sedan by Mou, angrily flung his hand away. "What are you doing?" "You know that I don't like to stay with that woman, but you still want this highness to accompany her? Didn't I come all the way here to propose a marriage alliance with you? You're the one who's going for a marriage alliance." Black Jade angrily roared at her. "This highness is suave and unrestrained, graceful and heroic. Are you blind?" What did you say?" Shaolin stared at him in shock. "You actually said that I'm blind? If you're not blind, then what are you?" Mou argued. "How can someone like me go for a marriage alliance? Why don't you try saying marriage alliance again?" Jolin clenched her fists in anger. I don't want to waste my breath on you. Let me out of the carriage." "Why?" "I don't want to eat with you now. I'm full of anger from seeing you." "That won't do. City Lord Gu invited us to eat. You don't want to eat just because you say so? Does City Lord Gu have no shame?" "You." "What about you?" Mou stretched out a finger and poked the little girl back to her seat. "Sit properly. This carriage is bumpy. Don't try to throw yourself into my arms." What did you say?" "Who wants to throw myself at you?" "Throw your sister's whole family." Shaolin turned around angrily and simply stared out the window. With one look, she saw 4 burly men beside her running as if they were flying, carrying a pink sedan and chasing after her. "Hey, your marriage alliance partner is catching up." Mou frowned. Chapter 57-57. Ignore him. Mou pulled Jolin to sit down and took a book from the side, casually flipping through it. Jolin stole a few glances at him. Seeing that he was expressionless and had never looked out of the window, she couldn't help but stick out her tongue. Sigh. Jolin glanced sideways and saw a fruit plate beside her. Her little hand reached over and pinched the dried plum fruit inside to eat. Mou turned a page of the book. "How have you been recently?" "Pretty good. In the upper 3 prefectures, will your little temper be good?" Mou muttered. "With your temper of beating up people wherever you go, if no one spoils you, you'll definitely be beaten up every day." Jolin glared at him. "Who dares to beat me?" She reached out and patted her chest. "I'm a level 9 spiritual master, who can bully me?" "Heh, with your weak body, so what if you're a level 9 spiritual master? You can only do whatever you want in the lower star region. If you go to the upper 3 prefectures, I believe that place will be filled with spiritual masters." Shaolin glared at him again. Don't jinx it. Why don't we try a fight? I'm not going to fight with you. Mou reached out and calmly took a cup of tea. Whether I win or lose, I won't be in the right. Who knows, you might have to complain to my big brother later. Bah, you're the one who complains. Jolin was so angry that she waved her little fists and turned her little face away angrily. She couldn't be bothered with him. Seeing this, Mou held the book and took a few steps closer to her. Stupid girl, are you angry? Scram. Mou looked at her sideways and couldn't help but curve his lips. You're such a bold girl, why do you get angry so easily? Oh, right, I bought something for you when I went shopping last time. I'll give it to you. Jolin turned her little face and looked at him with slight disdain in her eyes. Her meaning couldn't be more obvious. Kid, how can you be so kind? Hey, big brother is very good to you. Mou took out a tray from his inner world. The things on it were covered with a red cloth. When Jolin saw this, he subconsciously felt that this fellow must be teasing him with something again. In the end, when the guy lifted the red cloth, Jolin saw a golden object with a monkey offering a peach on it. The monkey was carved vividly and looked quite cute. This is you, right? Mou pointed at the cute little monkey with her finger. You're the monkey. Jolin snapped at him. Mou blinked. Are you born in the year of the monkey? It's for you to play. Let me tell you, it's really fun. If you pour a spoonful of cold water on it, it will change color. That peach can even roll off a monkey's hand. I bought it for you because I thought it was fun. Really? Shaolin's attention was immediately attracted by the metal weapon in this fellow's hand, and she immediately forgot that she was angry with him just now. The two heads were strangely huddled together, muttering as they did their experiments. From time to time, the sound of the little girl's laughter could be heard from the carriage. Princess Huaizhu, who ordered the 4 sedan bearers to carry her to chase after the carriage, was really depressed. Seeing the carriage stop in front of a restaurant, Princess Huaizhu hurriedly ordered the sedan bearers to stop as well. This time, she didn't walk so slowly. Instead, she dashed out of the sedan bearers and arrived in front of the carriage with a smile. Just like that, she looked at Mou with a faint smile and didn't speak. City Lord Gu and Zhang Yan, who walked over from behind the two of them, understood at a glance. City Lord Gu hurriedly said with a smile out of courtesy, "This must be the princess of the hoarding country who came from afar, right?" City Lord Gu. Princess Huaizhu smiled very politely at Gu Qingfeng. Gu Qingfeng chuckled and turned to look at Mou. Your Highness, Princess Huaizhu, Mou ignored him and directly dragged Jolin into the restaurant with large strides. Gu Qingfeng and Zhang Yan were left looking at each other awkwardly, then turned to silently glance at Princess Huaizhu. That princess was really well educated. Even after being humiliated in front of everyone, she could still maintain a faint smile. Even City Lord Gu couldn't help but sigh inwardly. That princess, as the city lord, of course he couldn't just abandon the princess who came from afar and follow his willful highness into the restaurant. At this time, it was time for him, the city lord, to mediate and lighten the heavy atmosphere. It's not very good of you to do that. Shaolin pursed her lips and unhappily shook off Mou's hand. What was wrong with this guy? Why did she feel as if she was firmly suppressed by him from the moment they met until now? He wanted to hold her hand at every turn and she couldn't break free no matter how hard she tried. Was she hallucinating? Mou pulled her up to the private room on the 2nd floor and walked in without asking. So long-winded. Shaolin stretched out her leg and kicked him in annoyance. Mou lowered his head and glared at her. Why don't you learn from me? Just like how my sister-in-law kicked my brother. Sit down. Mou casually pointed to a seat. He looked up and saw that behind Gu Qingfeng and Zhang Yan, the princess of the hoarding country followed them over like a hanged ghost. Mou frowned, but he didn't say anything. Gu Qingfeng hurriedly took small steps forward and shouted for the waiter to serve the dishes. Then he smiled obsequiously all the way, trying his best to ease the strange atmosphere. City Lord Gu. My elder sister will probably pass by Shijio City in a few days. I'll have to trouble you to receive her properly then, Jolin said with a grin. Is that so? Gu Qingfeng had a pleasantly surprised expression. So it's two? Gu Qingfeng suddenly realized that he shouldn't address Mo Lian and her husband as the crown prince and crown princess. He was momentarily at a loss as to how to address them. Mou poured a cup of water and said indifferently, "My elder brother and sister-in-law are now the Empress of Shenzhou." Gu Qingfeng immediately understood and hurriedly said, "Yes, yes, yes. Don't worry, second young Mississippi. Once His Majesty and Her Majesty enter the city, I'll immediately bring people to personally welcome them. Oh, you don't have to be so nervous. Just make the usual arrangements." Shaolin waved her hand. Actually, her elder sister wasn't a particular person. All right. This subordinate understands. Gu Qingfeng's confident expression made Jolin involuntarily cast a sidelong glance at him. French. She kept feeling that City Lord Gu seemed to have misunderstood her meaning. She really didn't want him to be too ostentatious because her elder sister wasn't a particular person. Just send a few people to receive them would be enough. Princess Hoarding Country suddenly exclaimed, "What? This young lady's elder sister is Her Majesty the Empress of Shenzhou?" Jolin was a bit embarrassed by this young lady's deliberate expression. Mou reached out and picked up the braised fish with her chopsticks. "More. When my elder brother sees that you've lost weight, he'll definitely beat me again. If his sister-in-law also interfered, then he would be too miserable." Chapter 57-58. Mou had been ignoring Princess Huaizhu, so the atmosphere was a little awkward. Jolin couldn't learn from Mou and ignore Princess Huaizhu when someone else was talking to her, could he? Thus, he gave her a friendly smile and said, "It's the real deal." Huaizhu, she felt that she couldn't continue the conversation. She interrupted at the wrong time because she wanted to find Huaizhu's sense of existence. Now she couldn't find a sense of existence in front of Mou. Instead, she was blocked by the words girl and couldn't say anything. In fact, she just said it casually and didn't pay much attention to the content. Now that she understood, she realized that she seemed to have doubted that young lady just now. She expressed surprise at Jolin's sister is the Empress of the Divine Land. Although her tone was soft, it was full of doubt. Jolin was not a fool. How could she not tell? Moreover, Jolin showed such an awkward and shocked expression in front of her. She was so deliberate that she couldn't bear to look at it. She didn't want to talk to her, but it was not Jolin's style to leave her hanging. So she replied with a smile and blocked Princess Huaizhu's words. "Aren't you doubting my sister's identity? Then I'll give you an accurate answer." Mou smiled and picked up another piece of beef for Jolin. She said indifferently, "Little girl, what's the point of arguing about this?" It was the truth. Whether she believed it or not had nothing to do with them. A frog at the bottom of a well had never stepped out of a small star region. Her vision was only so high. There was no need to argue. Jolin glanced at Mou and picked up a few more pieces of beef. She tried not to say anything this time. Princess Huaizhu chuckled awkwardly and did not continue speaking. It seemed that the topic just now was over. Gu Qingfeng saw that the atmosphere at the banquet was too low, so he quickly pulled Zhang Yan up. After a round of toasts, the atmosphere finally became a little better. Castellan Gu said with a smile, "Princess Huaizhu came from afar. If the dishes don't suit your taste, please let me know. I can ask someone to prepare some new dishes for you." Princess Huaizhu pursed her lips and smiled. She looked reserved and virtuous. "Castellan Gu, you're too polite. The wine and dishes are to my taste. I'm not picky." "Ah, that's good, that's good. It's just that these dishes are a little spicy, and these two dishes are a little salty. Our Hon people's tastes are lighter, unlike your northern Moi people, whose dishes are spicy and salty. In fact, eating more spicy and salty food isn't very good for your body. Especially at your age, it's the best time for you to maintain your health. You can pay more attention to your eating habits." Everyone was speechless. He wasn't picky at all. It was fine if he didn't say anything, but once he did, he put City Lord Gu on the spot. There were more than 20 dishes on the table. Most of them were salty and spicy to the princess of Hoarding Country. She didn't touch the rest of the dishes. Obviously, she disliked them. Jolin looked at the calm Mou beside him, then glanced at the stiff City Lord Gu, and almost laughed out loud. Speaking of which, the princess of the storage country might have kindly reminded the city lord that he should pay attention to his health when he was old. However, when these words entered his ears, he felt that it was not pleasing to the ears. Gu Qingfeng coughed softly and said, "Ah, yes, yes, yes." He then winked at Mr. Zhang and quickly changed the topic. As a result, the atmosphere at the banquet became even gloomier. City Lord Gu called for Mou and Shaolin to eat and drink. He wasn't too happy to entertain the princess of Hoarding Country. Mr. Zhang, who was sitting at the side, couldn't help but twitch the corner of his mouth. Seeing the princess sitting there alone, it was really awkward. He could only chat with the princess from time to time, so as not to embarrass the guests from other countries. Shaolin was very happy during the meal. The dishes here were very good. Shaolin even asked City Lord Gu to pack more than 10 family banquet sets and put them into the storage talisman. Princess Huai Zhu, who came from Hoarding Country, looked at the girl in front of her as if she was looking at a god. That indescribable gaze gave Shaolin goosebumps all over her body. "Why are you looking at me like that?" She was the type to ask anything and wouldn't keep her words in her stomach. Princess Huai Zhu was taken aback and was momentarily at a loss for words. She paused for a moment before saying, "Oh no. I'm just looking at the jade talisman in your hand. It's very magical." This princess has never seen such a glittering jade talisman before. She had also never seen a jade talisman that could store so many dishes at once. Could this be the legendary storage talisman? But could the storage space of a storage talisman be so big? That's not what you're thinking at all with that indescribable gaze of yours. Shaolin turned her face away and ignored her angrily. Did she think Shaolin was stupid? She could understand everything. Princess Huai Zhu, who came from Hoarding Country, clearly had a trace of mockery in her eyes. She must be laughing at Shaolin in her heart for taking away so much food after eating. She was like a village woman from the mountains who had no manners. Jolin was suddenly unwilling to talk to Princess Huai Zhu anymore. Mou curled her lips and stood up to grab her little hand. "Alright, it's getting late. We have to go back and pack up and get ready to leave." City Lord Gu and Mr. Zhang hurriedly stood up and bowed to send them to the entrance of the restaurant. They then respectfully sent them to the carriage and left. Princess Huai Zhu was left behind by Mou again. Standing at the door, she awkwardly exchanged glances with City Lord Gu. City Lord Gu coughed softly and pretended to turn around to talk to his subordinates. Mr. Zhang helplessly twitched the corner of his mouth and could only ask with a smile, "Would you like me to send the princess back to the post house?" Princess Huai Zhu smiled faintly and shook her head. "No need. I ate too much just now. I'm going to walk to digest." Zhang Yan nodded with a smile and left with City Lord Gu and the others. The little maidservant at the side quickly lowered her voice and said, "Princess, why don't you accept that gentleman's kindness? It's quite a long way to go back to the post house." Princess Huai Zhu said angrily, "It's not like we don't have money. It's not hard to pay for a carriage. Didn't you see that the city lord and his subordinates were disrespectful to me and spoke to me in a sarcastic manner?" The little maidservant nodded and followed behind the angry Princess Huai Zhu. As they walked, she asked, "Princess, was what that girl said true?" "What do you mean true?" "That girl said that her sister is the Empress of the Divine Land and her brother-in-law is the Emperor of the Divine Land." Princess Huai Zhu snorted. "Do you think that's possible?" "I think it's possible. Otherwise, how can you explain why His Highness the Crown Prince treats that girl differently? She must be of great status." Chapter 57-59. Princess Huai Zhu scoffed disapprovingly. "Impossible. Why would someone from the divine continent come to our lower star domain for no reason?" Huai Zhu didn't understand Bei Mua's background at all, nor was she clear on the reason why Bei Mua could stand tall on Sikong planet. How could Bei Mua still be so prosperous with such a preposterous old great king? She only believed in what she saw and heard with her own eyes. She resided in the Tsang kingdom and had never heard of Bei Mua's former crown prince and crown princess, so she naturally couldn't associate it with the upper three provinces. Earlier, she had merely gone along with Jolin's words because she was always ignored. She flattered Jolin on the surface, but in reality, she disapproved of it. Although the young maidservant's words were somewhat reasonable, in Princess Huaiju's opinion, how good could a maidservant's insight be? How could she really hit the nail on the head? It must be because that girl wanted to perform well in front of His Highness the Crown Prince, so she lied about her identity and insisted on plating herself with gold. Her intention was too obvious. She wanted to raise her own status. Huaizhu sneered and muttered inwardly, "One day, I will expose her identity and expose her to everyone in the world." What will she do? Make her unable to show her face in front of His Highness the Crown Prince and unable to raise her head. At this thought, Princess Huaizhu's mood involuntarily improved, and her lips curled into a smile. Bam! An oncoming person pushing a wheelbarrow abruptly bumped into her knee, causing Huaizhu to grimace in pain and cry out in alarm. Several accompanying maidservants hastily rushed over and hugged their princess as they angrily rebuked the peasant woman who bumped into her. "Are your dog eyes blind? Peasant woman, do you know who this is? Hurry and kneel to Her Highness the Princess." The peasant woman shuddered in fright and hastily knelt down, kowtowing repeatedly as she cried, Sorry, Your Highness the Princess." How could a peasant woman like her ever witness such a grand spectacle? Several maidservants who were dressed out of the ordinary were glaring at her with furrowed brows. She had someone reprimand them, but she was instantly speechless and could only shrink her neck as she repeatedly kowtowed. Everyone couldn't help but come to watch out of curiosity. Princess Huaizhu already had a belly full of anger that she had nowhere to vent. This peasant woman was simply asking for a beating. Seeing this, she angrily shouted, "Hit him!" Two burly bodyguards walked forward with sticks in their hands. Without saying a word, they knocked the peasant woman to the ground and beat her with sticks. The peasant woman screamed in pain, scaring the passers-by. Their Shijio city had always been very peaceful. They had never seen any rich family being so barbaric as to beat someone up in the middle of the street. A few of the young men couldn't stand it anymore and hurriedly stopped him. "Stop hitting him. If you continue, he'll die." How could a village woman withstand so many hits from such a thick stick? 3 minutes ago, she was already on the verge of death, with only half a breath left. By the time the city lord arrived with the city guards, the woman had already been killed on the spot. Governor Gu, who had always been gentle and refined, was so angry that he pointed at Princess Huaizhu and said, "You." A few young men stepped forward to stop him and were also hit several times with sticks. At this time, one of them had blood dripping from his head. He angrily roared, "Sir City Lord, this person disregarded her life and beat our compatriot to death in the middle of the street. She must be severely punished. She must be severely punished. Severely punish, severely punish, severely punish." Princess Huaizhu coldly swept a glance at the young man with blood dripping from his head and signaled to her personal maidservant with her eyes. Maidservant Qing Luo walked forward and said with an indifferent expression, "Can't you see? It's clearly your people who pushed the wheelbarrow and hit our princess. He even bruised the princess's leg. Now, as long as she lives and doesn't implicate her entire family, it's already the princess' greatest benevolence and grace. What more do you want to cause a ruckus?" Many of the commoners instantly fell silent. In fact, many of them were unaware of Princess Huaizhu's identity when they were making a ruckus earlier. They only thought that some rich family's daughter in the city had come out to show off. Now that they heard the maidservant's condescending tone, they immediately became listless. After all, they were only ordinary commoners. It would be too frightening if their entire family was implicated and their own families were implicated. They had been filled with righteous indignation earlier, but now they had all shut their mouths. Huaizhu couldn't help but proudly raise her chin. City Lord Gu's face was ashen. "Princess, you are not our northernmost princess. You are the princess of the hoarding country who came from afar. Our northern MO should be a good host and properly entertain you. But you cannot disregard the laws and casually punish our northern MO people. What? This stinking woman in front of them was not a princess from the sovereign capital, but an outsider? Most of the commoners had never heard of the hoarding country. When they saw the peasant woman who had died tragically on the ground, their national emotions were stirred, and they were even more furious than before. City Lord, this hoarding country's princess committed a massacre in our Shijio city. She must be severely punished. Yes, she must be severely punished. The agitated crowd gave Princess Huaizhu a fright. She hastily pulled Qing Luo and the other maidservants back a few steps and stammered, "What do you want to do? City Lord Gu, could it be that you want to look on helplessly as your citizens beat this princess to death? If something happens to this princess in your northern MO territory, or even in your Shijio city, how will you shoulder the responsibility? If this princess loses a single hair, my royal father will not let you off." The Shijio city citizens were infuriated and roared, "City Lord, please uphold justice for us commoners. City Lord, City Lord." Reporting. When a soldier from the City Lord's estate rushed in, Mou and Shaolin were fighting over a peach. That soldier looked straight ahead and knelt on one knee. "Reporting to Your Highness the Crown Prince, the princess of the hoarding country beat to death a peasant woman who entered the city to sell vegetables. Now, she is surrounded by Shijio City's citizens in a frenzy. The City Lord specially sent this lowly one to ask for Your Highness the Crown Prince's instructions on how to handle this matter." Xiao Lin's eyes widened in disbelief. Didn't she come out of the restaurant with us? They had only returned to the Qiao estate for a short while, yet this princess of the hoarding country had caused such a ruckus. What exactly was she trying to do? Mou saw that the little fellow was in a daze, so he naturally grabbed the peach from her hand. "Is it very difficult to handle?" Mou took a bite of the peach and absent-mindedly glanced at the person who came. "Is he getting worse and worse as a city lord?" "Deal with it as you should," Black Jade said indifferently. That soldier hastily kowtowed and hastily stood up to run outside. This lowly one understands. Chapter 5760. Xiao Lin turned around and stared curiously at Mou. How will City Lord Gu handle this? She didn't expect this Princess Lang country to be this kind of person. She looked like a gentle and soft person just now, but she actually beat a peasant woman to death on the street and provoked public indignation. From the looks of it, this princess shouldn't be a good person. Lin decided to ignore her when she saw her in the future. She didn't like to talk to people who bullied the weak. It was very boring. Sister said that if you have the ability, you should challenge the strong. What's the use of bullying the weak? Naturally, it will be handled impartially. Mou snorted and turned to walk out with a peach in her mouth. "I don't think we can leave in the afternoon. You might as well stroll around Shijio City for another 2 days. If you want me to accompany you, that's fine." Xiao Lin replied with a pooh and turned to glare at that guy. At night, someone considerately brought the news to Xiao Lin. The Princess Lang country had beaten a peasant woman to death in public and had been punished by the city lord with 50 strokes of the rod. These 50 strokes of the rod were not simple. Not only was it carried out in public, she was also ordered to remove all the defensive mystic weapons on the Princess Lang country. She was directly pressed to the ground and fiercely beaten like a normal person. When the Princess Lang country was moved back to the relay station, it was said that her back was badly mutilated and her injuries were very serious. However, although her injuries were very serious, as long as she returned to the relay station, someone would treat her and feed her medicine. After eating some first-rate healing pills, she would probably be fine after a few days of recuperation. It was rather pitiful for that peasant woman to lose her life in vain. City Lord Gu was already considered a rather upright man. If it was another city lord, they might have to curry favor with the Princess Lang country and properly deal with this matter without a conclusion. After all, the one who died was only a low-level peasant woman, while the Princess Lang country came to Northern Imo for a political marriage. She might even become the crown princess or a king consort. Perhaps her luck would come and she might directly enter the old great king's harem. In the eyes of most people, there was no need to offend a princess for a political marriage for the sake of a peasant woman. However, City Lord Gu directly arrested her and severely punished her with 50 strokes of the rod. The delicate princess was so unlucky that her flesh was split open. Of course, it was also because of the crown prince's support. But in the end, the princess of the hoarding country would still blame it on City Lord Gu. Jolin fiddled with the small bowl of soup in front of him. After taking a small sip, his face wrinkled. What kind of lotus seed soup was this? It was so bitter that she really didn't like to drink it. Mou, that scoundrel, even said that he had personally cooked it and insisted that she give him the honor of drinking it all. Shaolin picked up the soup bowl and walked to the side of the flower pot. She looked around and saw that the servant maids were all standing outside the door. Then, in a spurt of energy, she planned to pour all of the lotus seed soup into the flower pot. A shout came from the door. "Good! You little bastard, you actually want to throw away the soup that I worked so hard to make." Jolin's little hands trembled in fright, and the bowl almost fell to the ground. Mou flew over and firmly held the bowl of soup with one hand. She placed it on the windowsill at the side and said, "Drink it while it's hot. If it's so delicious, why did you throw it away? It doesn't taste good." Jolin was furious. "Even if it doesn't taste good, I made it myself. Drink it." Jolin's little face was bitter as she glared at him angrily. "I made this. It's delicious." Mou praised himself and took the bowl to force-feed her. "Let me tell you, drinking some lily and lotus seed soup in summer is so good for you girls. It's good for beautifying and nourishing your body." Jolin was so angry that she swallowed it in one breath. "I'll drink it. You can scram now." Mou curved his lips. I originally wanted to tell you a story. Since you want to rest, then What story?" Jolin immediately came over and asked curiously. "You already told me to scram. What else is there to say?" Jolin hurriedly brought over a stool for him and invited him to sit down. She also hurriedly brought over another stool. The two of them sat down opposite each other at a small table in front of the window. The little girl propped up her cheeks with both hands and stared at him with a pair of bright eyes. "Tell me. I used to love listening to my mother telling me stories about Big Sis the most." Mou secretly suppressed his laughter and said in all seriousness, "On our way back to the capital, we'll probably pass through Spectre Village again, so we have to be careful. When we came out of the village, one person was missing from the team. After that, we went into Spectre Village to search again and practically turned over every piece of land in the village. But guess what? You didn't find anything." "Not finding anything isn't a scary place. It's that our team is missing another person." Jolin shrunk her neck. "Why haven't I heard of this village before? We also entered the capital from Shijio City back then, but we've never heard of such a scary village. This village wasn't called Spectre Village before. It was just an ordinary village. But after the entire village was wiped out by corpse bugs 5 years ago, it was called Spectre Village." Mou suddenly reached out and grabbed Jolin's little hand. This action startled Jolin, who was listening to the story with rapt attention. "What are you doing? I just want to remind you that when the time comes, you have to keep up with the team and not be alone. The legend in Spectre Village is that everyone who follows at the back of the team will be eaten by an unknown monster." The little girl gulped and stared at his pitch-black eyes, believing his words. Really? So when one of you was eaten the first time and then turned back, you were eaten again?" Mou nodded. "So when the time comes, you mustn't take a step away from me, understand?" Jolin nodded. Mou nodded in satisfaction and reached out to stroke her head. "That's good. I'll protect you well. Then rest well. We probably won't be able to leave tomorrow or the day after. Do we have to wait for Princess Lang Countries but to recover?" "Princess Lang Countries back but we're probably smashed by a stick." Mou curled his lips. "Sort of. There was nothing to do the next day, so Shaolin didn't go out for a stroll. She tidied up her small courtyard, brewed a pot of tea, and spent a quiet afternoon. In the afternoon of the second day, Jolin slept until noon. The moment she walked out of the room, she saw Mou standing under the tree in front of the door. At this time, he was indifferently asking the little eunuch in front of him, "Did the great king say anything else?" The little eunuch shook his head like a rattledrum and hung his head low, completely not daring to look at His Highness the Crown Prince's death stare. "The great king has been living quite comfortably recently?" The little eunuch bit his lips and trembled slightly as he nodded repeatedly. "Then find something for him to do." Mou absent-mindedly turned around and instructed, "Go, find a group of people to bring Imperial Consort Li out and slaughter her. Remember to be nimble." You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.